The blonde guy gripped his sword in shaking hands, and when it finally happened, he nailed it. He actually won, then bolted away on trembling legs. Soon, he finally reached the guild in the village of Foil, yanked the door open, and blared to everyone that he had amazing news for them. The bruised, bloodied guy burst in and told everyone he'd just duked it out with slimes barely scraping by as he managed to wipe out 2 of them. And he couldn't stop smiling now that those monsters were gone. The second he finished speaking, the guild hall went dead silent. Every single eye snapped to the blonde guy. Then the guild visitors erupted into loud laughter because this guy was smashed by slimes from the F-ranked dungeon while only the village newcomers were the ones battling down there. But that blonde guy boiled with annoyance at their laughter. He knew slimes could hurt like hell when they got aggressive, and when he warned them, the crowd roared even louder because slimes were weak, right? People said the name Hopeless fit him perfectly, but Roa Foil Blonde, 19 years old, and stuck at just the 10th level didn't buy it. Their comments only sparked his irritation. After he finally cooled down, the guy convinced himself he could cash in 2 magic stones from the slimes for a massive fortune. Then the clerk behind the counter jumped in, pretending to go along with his story. But when he traded the magic stones from the slimes, he could only pull in 3 coins, and that left a heavy weight on his chest like the day was going to hurt. Roa didn't even know it was happening. Roa spun toward the employee, desperate, and demanded more money because the guy couldn't eat. Not after yesterday when he survived on grass and insects. The employee apologized but said the stones were already priced at the market rate. Roa just stared at the floor and it hit him. He'd be stuck eating grass and other junk again while the employee flipped through the POA info and spotted something seriously wrong with its status. Roa sat at level 25, but right then that guy was only level 10 and the man's face fell as he realized he'd wasted his levels all over again. Roa forged a new weapon just to take down those slimes for good, so he had to craft a brand new sword to replace the old one. That blonde dude could conjure objects out of thin air crafting stuff that actually matched his level was so rare it felt like a myth. And because of him, he scored a copper sword right at his 15th level. But the employee shrugged it off, saying that skill was only convenient on the surface, and Roa saw that truth better than anyone. He can't churn out unlimited first-level items every time he wants something new. He has to burn more levels to craft it, and that means he'll never be able to level into a real merchant. The more he churns out items, the more his level craters, and with it, his strength drains too. By the time it's done, even the adventurers group won't give him the time of day. Roa was on the verge of giving up. He couldn't earn a single coin or any experience points, and every time he leveled up, he slammed the points straight into his stats right away. His parents saw that, and he couldn't hide the embarrassment, but at least the employee respected his insane self-control. Out of nowhere, a furious gust slammed in near the Roa, then the blonde guy spun around, shocked. A brutal gust howled through the area, didn't hit him, but it wreaked havoc on everyone, and the employee froze in pure shock as the wind suddenly blasted out of nowhere. Rila instantly clocked it as magic, so that could only mean one thing: he was here. A black-haired guy burst into the guild room, flashing an arrogant grin at Roa, and the instant he showed up, the air seemed to fill with wind. Roa snapped her gaze onto Carter with pure annoyance. That's who he was. The other guild adventurers were furious at Carter's move because it was a bone-crushing danger. They chewed him out for the win, warned him not to cast magic inside the building, and yet he just ignored their angry shouting. Then the guy snapped that only his father carried supplies into this village, so Carter couldn't wrap his head around the idea that his dad would sell potions to people he didn't even like, while the adventurers boiled with fury and stayed shut. That black-haired jerk shot off arrogant remarks and basically decided to flex his magic on poor Roa since he couldn't use it. Then Carter smugly whipped out his wind magic to put the show right in front of her. Because Roa's skill alone couldn't possibly match Carter's magic, the black-haired guy leaned in and pointed out that Roa had wasted his hard-earned levels on a plain copper sword. The black-haired guy kept pressing him with ruthless words, calling out how pointless his skill was while Roa just stared back in cold silence, irritation blazing in his eyes. Then the guy strolled away from Carter, cool as ice because, to him, his skill wasn't some useless, nasty thing like everyone else's. It felt just like that childhood moment when you finally bought something with a few coins and it suddenly became the most special thing in the world to you. Roa leaned back with fearless confidence and told Carter he'd never feel anything like this again when he paid for something this precious because the moment he said it, he was already posted right outside the guild's exit. Carter snapped inside when Roa stayed so calm like Roa was faking strength. Like he didn't care about Carter anymore, and just then, a guild worker stepped in and hailed the guy. That man told Roa he'd totally forgotten his 3 coins for the magic stones, and the blonde guy bolted straight back to the guild hall to grab the money. He grabbed the bag of coins with a grin. Now he could finally buy something for himself while Carter simmered in anger because that black-haired guy didn't like Roy one bit. After a bit, Roa was already deep in the dungeon. And no matter what people claim, he's the only one who can use a skill like his while he just stood there, calm as ever, staring at his copper sword. Every adventurer got stronger by stacking levels, but leveling up wasn't the whole game. Skill points mattered too, because every time you rose in level, you earned them. and you could cash them in for fresh skills or even new magic. Even though Roa's item creation skill is insanely specific, it comes with a brutal catch. No matter how high his level climbs, he still can't earn skill points because his level gets wiped down fast thanks to the weird way his skill works. So even if he levels up nonstop, Roa still can't pick up new magic or fresh skills, so he hammers his sword training day after day. And yeah, he's been wiping out mountains of slimes left and right. After he wiped out the dungeon slimes, his level finally started climbing again, and Rose's health score shot up from 80 all the way to 200 points. That day, he stormed into the dungeon and wiped out every slime in sight, only to find a brand new floor crawling with tougher monsters waiting just ahead. From that moment on, Rokuya knew life wouldn't get easier. This could end with a brutal injury, because if that guy couldn't hold his ground against the monsters, he'd get wiped out. If he can beat that monster, Ro is going to unlock skills he'll carry for good just because of that nasty little skill. He didn't waste a second, kept going, then stopped dead. Then a massive barrier slammed into view in front of him, covered in wild patterns, and when the guy spotted him, he knew exactly what it meant. The dungeon boss was about to appear right in his face. The moment he steps through the barrier, the only way out is to beat the boss, no turning back. Ever Rula knew he was already doomed. And with his life falling apart worse by the second, hope wasn't getting any better. Even so, he shoved through the barrier anyway. No fear, no hesitation, and he didn't care if the rules meant his elimination. The second he crossed, a dark silhouette snapped into view behind him. A shadowy silhouette lunged at him, and Roku barely managed to twist out of the way at the last second. No way he's getting out of here that easily now. Skeleton Swordsman, the dungeon's boss, stepped right in front of Roa, clenching his battered sword like it meant business. He was meant to be beaten at level 50, and this armored monster was only rank F. After studying the stats, he realized the recommended level wasn't that scary at all. So Roa lunged in with his copper sword, fought off the monster point blank, and decided taking down the dungeon boss was totally within reach. The dungeon boss slammed the attack back and Roa rocketed across the floor. He dodged it, but that fighter had it rough because this swordsman skeleton was nothing like the other monsters in the area. Then the guy snapped into defense again, blocking a fresh blow from the dungeon boss because he could feel it. Even for him, this battle would be a brutal storm and he'd need to brace against its pressure to break the monster for good. After all, this win is going to flip Roa's whole life. He plants his feet, raises his copper sword, and glares his opponent down as the monster readies its blade to strike at the exact same X moment. Then their swords crashed together again. Roa didn't back up an inch. He locked eyes with the enemy, dead serious, because that guy had poured up to 15 levels just to forge a blade that sharp. So he couldn't afford to lose this battle. Roa's decisive words snapped the air, and then he slammed into the bone monster with raw force, cutting off its chance to defend itself. His strike hit with a brutal force, splitting the monster clean in half. Roa then crushed the dungeon boss, the blonde guy staggering as he caught his breath, staring at the fallen monster like he couldn't believe it, because he'd won. Then the guy crushed his shaking palms into a fist, and for a moment joy erupted with hysterical laughter. Bro, he finally made it and smashed the dungeon boss, shouting in pure joy as he celebrated crushing the monster. Out of nowhere, a magic circle snapped into place around the guy, and Roa just stared, stunned at the impossible sight. Then the system pinged. The skeleton swordsman was wiped out and his skill instantly shifted into crafting magic. The magic circle around Roa started to crumble, only it couldn't beat him, because that surprise guy had just unlocked a new skill creating magic, and the very next day, back at the guild, the visitors sat there looking totally calm. The blonde guy strode up to the reception with pure confidence, and everyone turned to stare in shock. Then Roa stepped up to the guild employee he knew, and the man looked at him with a sharp, puzzled question in his eyes. Roa flung him a bag stuffed to the brim with magic stones, and the blonde guy immediately tried to cash them out only to freeze in shock at just how many there were, demanding to know where they came from. Roa hauled way more stones than usual. He knew exactly what that meant tonight. He'd finally get to eat properly, and before long he was already pounding up to the famous tavern in Foil. A plain lunch sat in front of him: soup, a cup of tea, and dried meat. And Roya dug in with hungry joy, gulping it down like he'd been starved. The tasty warmth hit. Tears welled in his eyes because this wasn't that tough bread or watery soup he was always stuck with. He even tasted the sweet satisfaction of dried meat, and it lit him up with joy while the other customers stared at him like they couldn't understand what they were seeing, some pitying him as he cried tears of happiness over a discounted lunch. After demolishing a killer lunch, the guy leaned back and started wondering what was this new skill he'd just learned really capable of. He pushed himself into the dungeon and finally tested the skill, and when he felt how deadly it worked, he realized this kind of power was insanely rare. He couldn't help but smile, remembering that recent fight with warm nostalgia then. Out of nowhere, someone snatched his dried meat, and the stranger spotted that Roa had finally slipped into the tavern. It was Carter, chewing dried roe with a smug little grin when the black-haired guy clocked it. Roa had way too much free time. Roa seethed because Carter chomped through his dried meat, but he forced his rage down and took a deep breath because, honestly, the best way to handle it was simple. He'd start ignoring Carter since he figured he could do whatever he wanted as long as Roa wasn't paying for anything in his store. But the black-haired guy stayed breathing down Roa's neck, and Carter had just heard from the guild crew that Roa had been selling a mountain of magic stones. Roa didn't deny it for a second, because that meant pounding his way through a swarm of monsters inside the dungeon. Out of nowhere, the black-haired guy blared at his father that Roa was a thief who had snatched stones from their store then. Roa snapped his gaze at Carter in shock. He couldn't wrap his head around what was happening or why they were calling him a thief, and right away Carter's father stormed in with a grim glare, demanding that Roa explain how he even dared to pull this off. A one-eyed, blindfolded man surged forward, sword raised to punish the thief because theft is a serious crime to him. Then Carter's father ripped out his saber. Roa tried to explain himself, but Carter's father snapped. He swore Roa was faking it and rage burned because every single magic monster stone was gone from his shop. The black-haired man swore Roa stole the stones and hawked them to the guild. Roa denied it hard, but Carter kept pressing the issue, claiming a weak guy like Roa couldn't possibly pull off a haul that big. Everybody already knew Roa was drowning in money problems, so Carter stepped in and called out the one excuse that could explain why he stole the stones. After Carter's words landed, the guy sank back into his chair and Roa refused to get tangled in this fight because he had nothing to do with it. The black-haired guy cracked his neck, then raised his hands, ready to cast magic. Without wasting a second, Carter blasted him with wind squall magic, whipping the guy in a furious stream of air, and the blonde's entire meal went flying off the table. Carter snapped a warning, "Don't drag out the talk about those stolen magic stones." Roa's brows knitted as Carter moved, and with a snap of his skill, he realized Carter was siphoning the magic of the 5th level of consumption. Carter yanked the guy by the collar. Grin curling with pure menace, he came ready for Roa to spill the truth about stealing the magic stones, but when Roa wasn't involved at all, Carter shut down the idea that the theft had anything to do with him. Carter already knew it, so he leaned in with menace, ordered Roa to play the hero, and openly admitted he'd stolen the magic stones. Then the black-haired guy promised him compensation for that confession. The guy kept talking, and he begged Roa to admit he didn't have enough money, because honestly, no one was going to believe Roa anyway if he was just defending himself with zero proof, so Carter cut in and told him something even more important. Turns out it was that black-haired guy who swiped the precious magic stones from his father's store, and when he bragged it all with that arrogant grin, Carter couldn't help but smile at Rowan's misery. Roa snapped a frown at Carter's confession and went silent, while Carter figured it meant agreement until Roa suddenly yanked his hand free and everything blew up. The blonde Flash grinned and snapped back Carter's words. If he confessed he was a thief, he'd get a reward then. Carter's eyes narrowed in alarm at that smile, reminding him he still hadn't confessed to stealing. But Roa didn't take a thing. Those magic stones he cashed in with the guild were his all along then. Out of nowhere, a magic circle flared under the blonde guy's feet, and lightning tore through the room. Carter and his father froze at what they were seeing. The black-haired guy snapped to attention as he realized Roa was casting magic then. Roa's magic circle swelled bigger and bigger, and lightning started exploding through the room. Carter gaped at Roa as a magic circle spun up in his presence because just recently, he couldn't cast a single spell and Roa was acting like it was nothing. Then dark magical fire erupted in Roa's palm, snapping into the shape of an object silhouette. Roa stared down his opponents with a hard, frowning glare, then the other guy hurled out D-rank magic and Roa answered by launching a fire arrow, as a burning dark arrow ignited in his palm through sheer spellcraft. Every tavern visitor froze in shock at Roa's magic, staring at him with wide, trembling eyes because what he pulled off left them breathless. Carter and his father stared in total disbelief too, because Roa pulled off magic, and at the same time, Carter's fear hit so hard he started trembling from head to toe. Right away, a guild employee burst into the tavern, and a man in glasses was huffing and panting like he'd sprinted the whole way. He couldn't believe it. Roa was really using magic. Roa stared at everyone with a grim, gloomy glare, and his magical fire arrow was already coiled and ready to blast. With his magic creation skill, the blonde guy swung it into action, and Roa, freshly handed that power, stayed locked in the dungeon after blasting the boss just to practice it. Roa stared at his status window and bam, it was packed with everything tied to creating magic skills because as he watched, more and more magic powers started filling his system. Among them, the Great Fireball, Thunder Throw, and Water Cannon all weighted, each one maxed at level 50. And to unleash them, he needed around 200 mana units. Roar devoured every bit of their info, and then the guy let out a chuckle. Turns out all those magic skills were absolutely worth every level. He caught the pattern. This was basically the same vibe as the item creation skill, and trading levels was about to make him seriously stronger. So yeah, Roa finally gets his shot at learning real magic, and the guy practically bursts with joy because he's got a skill this insane. Now he can throw magic in the middle of a fight because with his old skill, all he ever got was items, and leveling up felt brutally out of reach. Now he can wipe out monsters with magic like it's nothing. Plus he'll rack up experience points non-stop. so Roa can level up without a single roadblock. After a while, he dropped onto a rock, fighting to catch his breath because Roa was at a brutal crossroads. He had to pick the exact magic he needed and get it right. As Roa stared at every kind of magic, he realized they were all amazing. So of course he wanted it all, but right now he could only pick one skill and his heart was already locked onto the Great Fireball. But because this magic chews up around 200 mana units, the guy nixed the idea because with his mana supply, he could only fire that skill one single time. But there are tons of other magic tricks that sip only a few mana units, so Roa got fired up, tried to buy every last one, and forced himself to wait. And out of every kind of magic out there, he finally made his pick. He plunged straight into the magic of the fiery spear. The moment he clicked the choice, a magic ball burst into existence in front of him, blazing with light as it hovered right above his hands. Soon, Roa finally snagged his first magic fire spear, but every blast burned 40 mana, and hit for around 1,000 health airy, costing him a brutal 25 levels in the process. Once he landed that skill, the blonde guy stared at his hands like they were about to change everything, and he just had to test it right then. Still, he popped back into the system window, and Roa couldn't waste a second. He wanted to burn through his last levels, because the magic he used every day only cost 1 level. After snapping up a bunch of cheap magic, the guy couldn't wait to test what he'd bought. He was ready to try it on tiny monsters. And Roa was convinced it was finally time for those little nuisances to crawl out. Right away, a monster popped in Kobold Fighter and spawned beside him like the game had planned it. It said level 32 to take it down. It was only rank E, and this thing looked like a cuddly puppy wearing armor. He couldn't stop staring at how absurdly cute his enemy was, and right then, Roa only had the first level. So the second the Cobalt Fighter twisted from his pretty look into a beast from the Nightmare Monster, the guy froze in pure terror, and that thing lunged straight at Roa. A monstrous beast lunged at the blonde guy, but Roa rocketed himself out of the strike at the last second. Then the guy charged to stop it, while Roa insisted he wanted to fight, only to realize he wasn't ready for a hit that fast. So there was only one thing he could do, slam his brand new Fire Spear skill into action. And the moment he cast the spell, a magic circle flared into existence. The moment he activated his skill, a roaring torrent of fire magic blasted the monster, and it crumpled under the blow with wounds so deadly they felt like the end. The fire spear vanished into thin air, then slammed into the beast monster so hard it crumpled, defeated, and wiped out for good. Roa just stood there with eyes bulging wide, completely stunned. In the dungeon, all you could hear was the final thud of the defeated monster collapsing to the ground until the blonde guy just sat there, not moving a muscle, stunned out of his mind. Then the guy blurted out in pure joy, grinning like a kid he'd actually beaten the enemy with magic. And that victory felt amazing to him. Roa wiped out the recommended level 32 monster with a single shot, and that's when it hit him his spell pack's real power. If it can land, Roa can crush his enemy even when the level gap is massive. Then Roa got a system ping boom. He'd earned experience from that brutal monster he just wiped out, and with a surge of power, his level shot from 1 straight to 11. Roa suddenly got it. Those level gaps weren't just numbers, they fed his experience. And in a blink he shot up by 10 levels, the kind of grind that normally eats a whole week for anyone else, and it felt absolutely incredible. He finally cracked that unforgettable rush of getting stronger, and joy burst into his eyes until tears streamed down his face. Then he declared he'd use the creating magic skill to seal his success in magic. Roa snapped back from his memories, then spotted the blonde guy in the tavern, already poised to unleash the fire spear, while the black-haired guy held his ground, tense and guarded. Carter froze with fear, staring at Roa like a ticking bomb because he feared the man was casting magic again. In a voice that shook from head to toe, Carter begged him to stop, swearing he'd apologize the moment he did. His entire body trembled, pure terror rocking him. Carter stood before everyone and finally admitted that Roa hadn't stolen a thing. Then a black-haired guy, beads of cold sweat running down his face, rushed to apologize to Roa for all his wild accusations. Roa kept that stubborn frown locked on Carter in dead silence until Carter let out a tired sigh, shrugged off his magic, and the fire spear snapped out of existence the moment it got cut. The blonde guy didn't want to stir up trouble in a place like this. He just wanted Carter to spill the rumor he'd cooked up for everyone. Carter listened to the guy and suddenly understood everything, but fear still clung to him. What if Roa could unleash magic? And then, tears burning in his eyes, Carter just had to tell everyone who the thief was that stole the magic stones. Spinning toward the crowd, Carter jabbed his finger straight at the guild employee and roared that the man was the thief who had stolen the precious magic stones, leaving everyone staring in stunned silence. The man started to squirm and insist he blurted to everyone that he wasn't a thief, while the employee stayed locked in on his work. Carter kept jabbing at him, and the black-haired guy even tossed Roa into the middle of the argument. Roa snapped with rage when he realized Carter never planned to confess in front of everyone. He only kept poking, provoking, and pulling the wool over people's eyes. Carter kept piling on the pressure, cornering that poor guild worker until the guy was desperate to pin every last bit of the blame on him for stealing the magic stones. So the man forced a confession by firing magic wind bullets at the target, and the wind magic tore straight for the terrified employee Roa only narrowed his eyes at Carter's move. Right then, Roa's fiery spear blew Carter's magic to pieces, and the guild worker got shielded from the black-haired guy's attack. Roa leaned in and told Carter, "I want you to spill it all yourself." But yeah, that doesn't look like it's happening because Roa just grabbed the whole room's attention and begged everyone to watch his magic. A glowing magic ball snapped into his palm and the blonde guy fired off the magic of life, basically recording it and then playing it back. Right then, Carter's voice blasted through the tavern and everyone froze, stunned by the recording and the nerve he laid out his plan to turn in the thief and cash in the reward. Right then, the guy was broke. So he begged Birdie to help him scrape together extra cash to cover his bills while Carter's father frowned, stood there with a saber clenched in his hands. Birdie didn't care a bit about the man's situation. No proof meant the man wouldn't trust Carter's claim, so all he could do was throw advice at him. And when Carter heard Birdie's voice, his face drained of color. His whole body shook with terror because he already knew exactly what Birdie was about to tell him. Birdie's final words on that Carter recording weren't random. They warned about a guy ripping off magic stones from his father's shop. And the moment everyone heard it, the whole place froze in stunned silence. Carter spun around, panicked and terrified. A cold sweat poured down the black-haired guy's face, and Carter went ghost white, scrambling to explain himself to the others, but the words just wouldn't come. Right behind the guy, a furious, gloomy man with a bandage stalked. Carter felt his father's presence and turned even paler. Carter's father snapped in rage at his son's stunt, then drilled him with a hard lesson right there in the tavern. Roa stood there stunned, watching Carter get punished. And afterward, a guild employee thanked Roa for stepping in. Every resident cheered when Carter finally got punished by his own father, wiping tears from their faces as they thanked him like a hero. Then Roa clocked it all at once. Carter had pushed everyone way too far. But now the laughs would finally stop. Roa couldn't do anything, and the others couldn't mock him anymore, so that young man let out a wave of relief. Maybe this time he'd finally breathe life into it because the villagers' praise lit him up. And the very next day, he hurried back to the guild. A crew of guys pulled Roa into their team, begging for a solid ally who could guard their backs and smash through every fight. Also, that blonde kid got invited by a bunch of girls to join their team, and they wrapped the deal in a sweet smile, promising they'd take care of him. Even this huge, flower-suited muscle man stepped in and sized him up. Then the guy blurted out to Roa that he was a fan, and the next thing he knew, the man was inviting him to join his team. It sent every single person away, and the guy basically told them, "I'm not taking company, I just want to be alone right now." The man nodded and swallowed the guy's words, then he crashed through the stone wall and sprinted out of the guild, swearing to Roa he'd grind his muscles in return. Roa stared at it like it was awkwardly staring back because just that day, 5 different groups tried to drag him onto their team and the guy could feel it. They all desperately needed magicians. If he hooks up with someone like Birdie, those hard-earned points get split evenly across the whole team. And that made it a bad deal for Roa since his skills just don't fit the setup. So yeah, he'll have to go solo fight, get stronger, and level up into something way cooler, and Robert chose to train his magic. Most importantly, he must have kept his hands off any more magic because the second he stepped into the guild, a guild employee snapped in to greet him, and that guy with the glasses was already waiting. The guild worker demanded Roa's guild card on the spot. Roa blinked in shock, but he still handed it over without a fight. The bespectacled man snatched the card from the other guy, then grinned at Roa and dropped the news he'd been waiting to tell him. A guild worker leaned in and congratulated Roa because the truth hit hard. The guy had just been promoted from F rank to E rank, and Roa's eyes popped wide at the news. He stared at his new rank in total shock, couldn't wrap his head around why he'd been promoted at all until a guild employee broke down exactly how the system works. An adventurer's rank wasn't just luck, it rose from what they brought to the guild and what they could truly do. And that recent incident slammed it home. Roa was so good they had no choice but to clear him for the E ring. Then the man handed the guy his brand new guild card. Its color flipped from iron to bronze and Roa grabbed it, staring in awe as he admired the change. The employee couldn't help but fret about how that guy would react while Roa just stood there stunned, staring at his brand new rank because he was the only one who had taken that long to finally reach E rank. With a heavy heart, the man admitted to himself he'd missed the old version of the guy just a little. Now they'd never see Roa crawl back home after that slug bite because before long, Roa was already trapped deep in the dungeon. He couldn't stop buzzing about his brand new guild card right now. He'd just become an E-rank adventurer. And he was grinning as he studied that bronze-colored card like it was pure treasure. With his card held high, Roa grinned and decided to go hunt demons because, hey, he was already an E-rank adventurer. And right now he was absolutely buzzing with good vibes. Suddenly, a brutal voice ripped through the dungeon, barking at a stranger named Sonia to charge in the vanguard, and Roa froze, stunned by the sheer nerve. Turns out Birdie's crew was right there. Close enough to run into him, his team was busy fighting the monsters in the room. But Roa vanished from their sight so he wouldn't be noticed. The team snapped at Sony, yelling at her to wake up and do her job. And one guy even called out her spot on the squad. She was the tank. The bruised girl with the shield bowed to her comrades and apologized, then swore she'd give it everything she had, clutching that brutal, heavy shield in both hands like it stood almost as tall as she did. Roa watched Birdie rip into the girl and recoiled. He looked utterly disgusting, like a shield in the tank's setup that traps the enemy's attacks on itself. From behind, Sonya looked like she belonged to the rear guard slim. Light, easy to miss, yet somehow this girl always made sure the enemy's eyes snapped right onto her. He couldn't wrap his head around why they kept tearing into her, until it finally hit him. Being stuck on that kind of team wasn't as simple as they made it seem. Roa had already spun away from Birdie's team. He didn't step in, didn't lift a hand to the girl, and basically shrugged it off as none of his business because that guy was already itching to get out. A goblin with a sword suddenly lunged from behind Sonya right as she went for the attack, but she never sensed it, and her companions only gasped and pointed in terror, refusing to lift a hand to save her. Sonya could only brace for the monster's strike. Her shield felt so damn heavy that she couldn't move fast enough. A blonde girl shouted at Sonya and screamed that a monster was right behind her. Then the team didn't even try to rescue the girl as Sonya got pinned in place and couldn't stop the attack because the monster had already swung his sword straight for her. She fought like she could, but that monster slammed her from both sides, crushing every guard she had. So Sonya shut her eyes and sank into pure despair. Then boom, the monster that came for her got obliterated by scorching fire magic, and it was Roa who ripped it apart with a blazing fire spear. Sonya locked eyes on the defeated monster, and in the next breath she realized magic had wiped him out. So the girl believed a sorceress had saved her from her own team, and Sonya rushed to the sorceress saying, "You got me just in time any later and it would have been irreversible." But the blonde girl didn't get it at first. Sonya thanked the blonde girl for saving her, and even though the sorceress knew it wasn't truly her doing, the blonde still strutted like she owned the moment. So she accepted Sonya's thanks with arrogance and demanded even more. The sorceress got grilled about how she pulled it off, but the girl kept lying, saying she saved Sonya. Roa heard every word as she turned and headed off in the opposite direction. The guy who slipped away from the Birdie's team felt a rush of relief. No one clocked him. No eyes followed, and he could finally breathe without getting dragged into trouble. Roa pressed on, lost in thought, because every adventurer knows the danger of the job. One wrong move can let someone snatch your reward from right under your nose, so most people won't lift a finger to help outsiders. But he finally got it. If he hadn't stepped up, the girl would have been wiped out by the monsters, and he couldn't bear to watch that happen. After blasting the girl with magic, his mana tanked one fire spear alone chewed up a whopping 40 mana units, but the rest of his stats stayed solid, and he was already sitting at level 50. The magic creation skill he got lets him tap into item creation too. So Roa's already holding 2 rare abilities, and he has to use both, right, as that guy starts applying them. After he fired off 2 skills back to back, the blonde guy got handed a mana recovery potion crafted at level 10, and it was loaded with enough power to refill 300 mana units. Roa dumped 20 levels into this potion before. He'd had to burn 50 levels just to get one, but now it costs 30 levels less. Once he grabbed the exact right potions, he burned through his last remaining levels and forged a brand new kind of magic. Roa stumbled on a brand new kind of power, a tiny item box, and it blew his mind. It didn't burn any mana at all, it just tucked stuff into a pocket of space, holding up to 100 items. Before long, a little box for small stuff was set up, and right near the Roa, a tiny magic circle blinked into existence while the guy had 2 mana recovery potions ready to go. Roa pulled one out with ease from the space inside the small box. Buying skills and items wouldn't let him boost his max mana by eating levels, so this was a real lifesaver. Mana recovery was his lifeline. Fueled by that spark, Roa dug in and kept fighting inside the dungeon, chasing level ups hard while the guy just wanted to stock up on more mana recovery potions. On day 1 of his level up marathon for potions, this guy boosted his stash by 12, and by the end he was sitting on 44 mana recovery potions in his inventory. On day 2, he shoved 20 more potions into his count, and just like that he ran into Birdie's crew again while the blonde sorceress marched up and chewed out sad Sonya all over again. On the 3rd day, Roa stormed through monsters and brewed 30 potions like it was nothing, and by the end, he was sitting on 94 mana recovery potions. On day 4, he shoved the drawer full of stuff until it was packed tight right now. He had a full 100 mana recovery potions. Roa grinned, grabbed the 100th bottle, and stared at it like it was a prize, because for the first time, mana worries were officially gone. Then Roa stormed down the stairs straight into the lowest floor of the E-rank dungeon, and the blonde guy was itching to see the lower level boss halfway down as Roa climbed. He suddenly noticed something. Roa peered through the barrier and realized someone was actually going toe-to-toe with the dungeon boss Sonya, the girl with the shield standing her ground against a lower-level monster, while right in front of her loomed a massive thing that croaked like it knew exactly how doomed she was. It was the Frog King, an enormous frog monster. The quest even warned you were meant to win at level 120, and this beast was classified as a D-rank monster. Roa gaped at the monster, stunned by how massive it was, and then it hit him. It was the dungeon's main boss, and before he could react, the beast lunged and whipped its long tongue straight at the girl. The Frog King snapped with his tongue and slammed the girl, but she didn't fold her shield, met the strike, and stopped it cold. Then the monster slammed its frog paw down and attacked the girl again. trying to shove Sonia's shield aside while the girl fought tooth and nail, barely holding the shield against the monster's crushing pressure. Roa clocked something off in the fight. He couldn't believe it. That girl was going toe-to-toe with the monster all by herself, and the rest of her team was nowhere to be seen, just her alone. Sonia's a tank, so she can't take that monster down. Solo, one glance tells him the monster will crush her, and he clocks that the girl's about to get eliminated. Rua was already about to rush to her and help, but the guy snapped himself back because one thought hit him like a punch. Throa wanted to shut the whole thing down, but Sonia threw her shield up and fought off the frog's attack, and suddenly it hit she was an adventurer who'd keep fighting for her life. He was the same all the time, always convinced there was no point keeping anyone close. So Roa stayed alone again and again, staring at his hand like it hurt, knuckles locked in a tight, trembling fist. Roa was convinced Sonia was just like her, so sure she'd never let anyone step in and steal the chance to get stronger. And just like that, the guy was already sprinting back up the stairs. Suddenly, he slammed to a stop. Then the thought hit him. Maybe she didn't need his help, and in that gloomy road, his mind just got stuck, swallowed by shadow. But nope. Rohaga didn't want pity, he wanted help. And deep down he was desperate for it, yet shame crushed every thought, driving him to prove to himself over and over that he wasn't weak. He weighed whether to jump in and help the girl, telling himself it was his call to interfere. But when he saw her frozen in place, helplessly waiting for the monster's strike, he finally made up his mind. Roa stopped caring about anything but saving her. Then after the rescue, he forced the truth out of the girl, so he charged the royal frog, spearing it with a blazing fiery blade and cutting off its chance to strike. Even though his attack didn't drop the frog, the monster paused for a heartbeat, so the guy finally got it. One blow wouldn't beat this enemy, not ever. Sonia was left speechless by the sudden rescue, and her curiosity exploded as she demanded to know who he really was. Roa only introduced himself to the girl as a passing adventurer, then told her he was taking over this boss as she stared at her battered rescuer in disbelief. Meanwhile, the guy and the monster locked eyes, then a grim warning hit to beat the royal frog. You needed the 120th level because where he stood at the moment, he was only level 40. He realized the gap between him and the king frog was way too brutal to cross, but he couldn't walk away and leave the girl stuck in danger. The guy locked eyes with Sonia, but she couldn't even lift a finger. She was wrecked from fighting all by herself, so Roa had to step in and take the monster on, and right then the royal frog lashed out with its tongue. He jerked out of the way just in time, then the frog's strike smashed the stone floor slabs to rubble. After watching the monster's attack wreck everything, Roa realized one brutal blow from it could end him, so he didn't panic. He went with a plan, smashed the royal frog using magic. But he didn't even get a moment to cast magic. The royal frog struck again, snapping its mouth to wreck him, and somehow Roa kicked off its attack with a sharp bounce before it could connect. The monster kept hammering at him without stopping, and Roa's nerves snapped tight. Meanwhile, the guy fled from her for a long stretch, driven back by the sheer pressure of the royal frog. Fire Spear wasn't instant, it needed 4 long seconds to kick in, but the king frog shut him down before it could activate, so he couldn't fire it right then. Sonia suddenly felt the urge to speak to him. Sonia, bleeding and barely conscious, managed to whisper to the guy that the royal frog had a weak spot right on her belly, so Roa needed to nail her stomach. The blonde guy shot Sonia a grateful nod for the hint, then snapped into a fighting stance, sword in hand, already mapping out how to plunge into the monster's belly because slipping into a place like that with magic was brutal. But he had one more trick up his sleeve. If the magic fails, Roa just cracks open her potions right then. A bottle pops out of his space, and Sonia's eyes widen when she realizes it's a mana recovery potion. Right then, a giant royal frog launched itself at the guy, and while Roa managed to dodge in time, the potions did nothing. Each bottle just shattered on the floor with a cruel splat. So Roa yanked the potion bottles out of his space again, but the potion attack still crumpled and failed. Rage burning, the guy didn't stop. He barked for even more potions, and it still wasn't the end. The injured girl shouted a warning about what waited for him. Then the king frog leaped up and loomed straight over Roa, and the guy finally got ready. He stayed stone calm before that towering royal frog, like he'd rehearsed this moment. Roa pulled a potion from his space and got ready to strike. When that giant frog surged toward him, Roa hurled a potion bottle straight into the royal frog's eye, smash, sending the bottle shattering into tiny pieces on impact. The frog shrieked from the fire in his eye and totally blanked the guy while the monster got yanked off its focus by that same pain. The royal frog seized the opening and held his ground. In the very next second, Roa launched straight at the monster, and that guy sprinted while slapping down a magic circle. Then he kicked off the countdown, taking a full 4 seconds to get the spell going. The guy sprinted straight toward the king frog as the monster still staggered away from Roa's last attack, and he quickly slid through the broken potion's liquid to get there fast. Roa charged up to the monster, leapt straight under the frog, and landed exactly where he needed to be right as the guy's countdown hit 0 and the magic spell started roaring to life. 4 seconds after the activation window opened, Roa's magic skill snapped shut. Then a fiery spear burst out of the magic circle and slammed the royal frog straight in its weak spot, its stomach. This attack obliterated the monster. And the guy even crushed the dungeon boss, leaving a stunned Sonya watching it all unfold from the side. Her breath caught the moment she saw what he was swinging at because the spell in his hands looked just like the one that once saved her from the monster. Roa also told her he never tried to use the potions on himself. He just scattered them to slash the friction and let everything glide like a dream. Then the guy planted his hands on his hips, smirked like he owned the moment, and told everyone that staying cool isn't as easy as it looks. For a split second, the girl froze. Then tears spilled from her eyes as Sonya thanked the guy right after. She told him the guy had shrapnel lodged in his back, and Roa stayed dead calm about it. Then the blonde guy suddenly felt something. The system kept pinging him with notifications. Turns out he'd racked up experience for beating the Roa dungeon boss, and his level shot from 40 all the way to 70. He also snagged the foil title, the Dungeon Conqueror, and that win shot his health up by a whopping 100 points, bringing him to around 300 HP. Roa couldn't believe his luck. He jumped up by a whopping 30 points, snagged an achievement for beating the dungeon boss, and then, out of nowhere, he looked over and saw Sonya crumple onto the floor. The girl collapsed from sheer exhaustion and brutal wounds, going limp and unconscious. Her body had slipped past the point of control, and Roa froze in terror. He sprinted straight up to her, snatched Sonya off the floor, and held her tight in his arms. Roa saw it instantly. Sonya was on the brink, badly hurt from fighting off that monster. So Roa used his skill to grab a health recovery potion. But to get it, he had to burn 10 levels first. The guy reached to give the girl a drink of it, but Sonya, desperate and still in a serious state, fought to push the potion into her hands. The girl refused because it was far too expensive. Then Sonya's body seized up, and agonizing coughs racked her as she shook in distress. Roa saw the girl's condition slipping fast and shoved a health restoration potion into her mouth on the spot, then leaned toward Sonya and said, "Don't worry, this one cost me nothing." Once she swallowed the potion, her whole body lit up with relief. Pallor vanished from her cheeks. Her battle wounds sealed up too, and Naya was suddenly feeling way better. Sonya couldn't believe the only way she could thank him was by saying thank you twice, because the moment she saw his magic, she knew he'd already saved her from the goblins earlier, and that second rescue only sealed it. Roa nodded along awkwardly, but the guy didn't want any thanks from her. Sonya cut him off fast, saying she'd never stop admiring what he did and who he is. Roa leaned in and introduced himself to her, then confessed he already knew her name because her comrades had said it. After that, he asked Sonya straight up where she wanted him to split up her team members. The mood flipped. The second she spoke, Sonya's voice went heavy as she admitted her teammates bolted the moment the fight started, leaving her stranded to face the King Frog all by herself. Rua's brow knotted with fury because the Birdie's team ditched Sonya and left her alone, and the bad news set him off. She shoved herself into the tank spot on the team and always charged into battle first until her teammates saw who they were up against, the King Frog. They panicked, knew they couldn't beat it, and bailed out, leaving her to stand there alone. Rage surged through Roa when she realized that Sonya's comrades abandoned her, even while knowing the monster would wipe her out when he couldn't grasp why she still followed them. Sonya leaned in and told him she had a one-of-a-kind skill. That rock-solid skill kept the girl from learning any fighting moves, so if she wanted to survive, she had to team up and just take whatever everyone else throws at her. If Roa hadn't shown up, the girl would have paid a far harsher price. Sonya still smiled at the guy, but tears glittered in her eyes. Frowning hard, the guy fell deep in thought after the girl's words. Sonya had the same awful abilities he'd had before, which is why everyone kept looking down on her, while the upset girl kept wiping away her tears. Roa had it rough, but Sonya, she had it worse, so badly she couldn't even stand up and fight back against the monsters and the rest. These thoughts weighed on him like a storm cloud. Sonya noticed the change right away, and she couldn't stop worrying about how he was doing. He urged her to head back to the village, and the guy's fists clenched tight with pure rage, while her teammates were probably tucking into dinner at the tavern right now. Roa couldn't let this slide. He rushed to the girl and apologized, because the guy was determined to help her a bit more. Even though his rage was boiling, Sonya just stared at Roa, completely baffled. Meanwhile, in a tavern in the village of Foil, Sonya's teammates were downing drinks and laughing, while the man and the girl leaned in, trading chatter about what happened in the dungeon. A left in a hurry. Birdie had heard rumors that a D-rank monster was lurking in the dungeon, but he never expected it to be this huge. Meanwhile, the man just sat there, sipping his drink with a smug grin. The blonde girl breathed out in relief that they finally escaped that monster's clutches. She even felt for Sonya, but only in words. Because that's the cost of adventure stuff like this, can hit you anytime, so stay ready. And then they burst into loud laughter. Suddenly, a gloomy Rola and a worried Sonya burst into the tavern. Birdie froze in shock the moment he spotted her, and the sorceress went completely still, stunned by how Sonya looked. The man figured the monster had already wiped her out, so he stared at Sonya in pure shock, asking how she was still alive until a blonde girl slammed in and knocked Birdie out with one punch. The sorceress rubbed the skin by her eyes, and tears immediately spilled out. Then the girl, with fake tears, forced a smile, acting like Sonya's return meant nothing at all happened to her. The blonde girl rushed up to Sonya and clung to her in a tight hug. then snapped into fake panic, claiming she was terrified for Sonia and swearing she was trying to stop her from charging into that monster battle alone. Sonia froze dead on her feet, not just because the girl lunged into her embrace, but because of what she blurted out. The girl stared with wide eyes, and the moment the sorceress spoke, all her words just vanished. Roa clocked the girl's scheme. She was putting on a show to make Sonia look dumb, and rage flared in him. The guy also knew one thing. Adventurers actually care a surprising amount about public opinion when they want to pull in the best recruits. To punish them, nothing hit harder than wrecking their reputation. So that guy stormed in and loudly complained that Sony's team had abandoned her to the monster while Birdie stared at Roa with pure panic and rage. The guy kept yelling through his rage, swearing that everyone had ditched Sonia to fight the King Frog and that they'd somehow escaped because if Roa hadn't snapped in to save her, the girl would have been wiped out. Roa then made it clear this team could pull the same move on someone else anytime, and the guy kept blasting the team with loud scolding. Birdie tried to shut Roa down, snapping at him because his loud yelling was dragging in the visitors. But enraged Roa refused to stop. He just kept speaking the truth. Then Birdie snapped back, refused to believe a word of what he said, and demanded proof about the dungeon. Roa shot back that he had proof. And right then, something flickered into existence on his palm. Roa burst into the room and told everyone he'd crushed the King Frog, then held up the magic stone in his palm like undeniable proof. No matter what, you can't get it without cutting down that monster, because if the team hadn't slipped away, they'd have faced the exact same thing. But Birdie cooked up an excuse on the spot. He told the man that Roa's item creation skill could forge a magic stone. And then Birdie added that he'd already traded his own magic stone for cold, hard cash. That man added that Sonia was alone because she liked to do everything on her own. And the blonde girl nodded along to those words about Birdie's. All the tavern customers were torn, unsure who to trust. Ruea just watched their indecision for a beat, then wandered off and let them choose their own side. Roa darted a finger right at Sonia's face, and the moment she saw it, color drained from her cheeks. Horror hit. Fear locked in, and her whole body started trembling on its own. But when the visitors saw Sonia turn pale and tremble, they knew she wasn't bluffing about the team. Then the crowd snapped their eyes to Birdie and the blonde sorceress, glaring hard, because they'd ditched their comrade while she was in trouble. Roa shot at a nasty grin and shrugged. His reputation was already in the gutter, so it didn't matter to him. But he hadn't even realized what might happen to Sonia's old comrades as the guy's ridicule finally lit the rage in him. Rage sparked in the adventurer as he lunged at the guy, but before he could even land another hit, Roa calmly slipped out of the way. He snapped his palm up to block the man's attack, then yanked Birdie by the collar and, in a single move, slammed the guy onto the floor. Ro handled the enraged Birdie with total ease. He's already trained his whole life to square up with monsters like Birdie. No one beats him in a fight unless there are rules. Birdie, hauling herself off the floor, only got more furious at Roa's words, so the sorceress, staff up and ready, stepped in too, determined to help Birdie take Roa down. But just as the fight sparked off, a guild employee's furious shout cut through the chaos, and the glasses-wearing man erupted in rage, snapping orders for everyone to calm down, shouting like it was a command from hell. Still blazing with rage, he kept yelling at them and snapped, "Get outside!" and warned them that if they kept fighting, he'd strip them of their guild cards. Then he'll snap his eyes on them, and Birdie's stomach drops. This soft-hearted guildmaster just lost his temper, like the other day at the guild tavern when something similar already happened. Sonia heard the guildmaster's words and instantly grabbed Roa's hand. Tugging him out of the room like it was on fire once they stepped outside, she pushed him to leave. And when Roa stared at her in confusion, Sonia snapped that he'd gone way too far. Sonia flashed a bright smile and thanked the guy for his help, feeling lighter by the second while Roa just stared, shocked at the cheerful girl, only for him to grin right back and accept her gratitude too. Then he should have walked away because that fight was way too brutal for what he was ready to handle, and the guy and the girl were grinning at each other like nothing bad could ever happen. Soon enough, they were already in the cafe, and a bunch of shoe-s dishes sat on the table like a promise, so Sonia grinned and told the guy to dig in, and said she'd cover it all herself so he wouldn't have to stress a thing. Roa stared at the rich food in pure shock because every single dish looked cooked to perfection, and the guy was actually ready to eat it yet. Sonia didn't think this meal would be anywhere near enough to repay him for saving her. Once Roa realized he could chow down on anything, he immediately attacked the grilled meat. The second the guy took a bite, his face lit up in pure ecstasy because this dish was packed with meat, and it sent Roa Hala grinning with joy. The girl's cheeks burned from embarrassment, but she couldn't hide how relieved she was that Roa loved the taste. Honestly, nobody's ever tasted something this delicious. Sonia was brand new, so she probably didn't realize what was going on, and Roa flat out told her he'd only learned magic a few days ago. And he admitted that before Roa stepped in, everyone mocked him like he was a joke. Then Roa saved Sonia's life because he was standing there all alone. But he also confessed that, at some point, he tried to break free, so in his mind, he didn't feel like he deserved all that gratitude from her. That's why the guy tried to cover dinner with his own money. Roa's already decided to cash out his magic stone for the cash, and the moment Sonia heard him say it, She went silent for a beat. And when the girl said that in the end he never gave up and still saved her, Sonia knew it was true because that guy didn't care a bit about the strength difference. That's why Sonia wouldn't let it go. She wanted to repay him for everything, no matter what. Then she leaned in and told Roa to team up with her and form a group. Roa, still chewing her food, froze in total shock at the idea. He stared in shock when the girl asked to team up with him. And Sonia leaned in to admit the truth. She wasn't just anyone. She was a noblewoman, and she'd only started roaming for survival not long ago. Sonia seemed like she'd started from nothing. So she figured they were kindred in that way, and the guy still chewing on meat froze at her words. After mulling it over for a while, he finally got it. This was the truth. Back in the last fight, he'd learned the hard way that going solo is brutal, but a tank like Sony could strike the perfect balance between the vanguard and the rear guard. Roa nodded along with her idea. Sure, they'd team up if she was okay with it, and the girl lit up instantly, grinning like her heart just exploded with joy. Sonia didn't even bat an eye about the deal this time. They'd finally have something to cash in. The guy and the girl raised their drinks, clinking glasses with Amer herself, and you could tell they couldn't wait to team up and work together. The very next day, the guy was knocked out cold in bed while Roa spent the night in his rented hotel room until the sun's rays finally poured in, and Sonia burst into action, shaking Roa awake on the spot. The sleepy guy fought to pry his eyes open until she told him it was already past noon, and Sonia pushed him to wake up. Finally, he cracked his drowsy eyes open just barely. A shocking scene hit him like a punch. This girl planted herself over the guy with her massive shield raised, and Sonia drove her shield straight into Roa's bed. But the guy jolted awake on the spot and barely dodged the strike. After everything she had done, Sonia flashed that calm smile and wished him a good morning, while the terrified Roa stared in disbelief at the wild scene, completely clueless about how she ended up in his room or what the heck was happening. Sonia told him the rented rooms in their hotel were lined up side by side, so she slipped over to wake him, and that door to his room was left unlocked. Roa winced, replaying last night's headache he had dumped Sonia at the same hotel he stayed in, and the guy was so smashed on booze he barely remembered a thing from out there. I just remember slurring to Sonia, "Get me more meat," while I was drunk. The girl asked the guy if he always woke up this late, and he dodged the question without saying no because, yeah, he always slept in, loving every extra minute in the morning. Then Sonia leaned in and asked that guy straight up if he was lazy all the time, and Roa nodded along, while everyone kept saying the blonde was always lazy. Then Sonia beamed and told the guy, "From now on, I'll wake you up." But Roa snapped back right away, refusing her help in a desperate, shaky voice. Sonia spotted the guy's disgust the second he shut down her proposal. Then she ordered him to get up early, and the girl slipped out of his room before he could stop her. Then she halted at the exit, cheeks blazing, and told Roa that his sleeping face was ridiculously cute. Roa's chest tightened at what Sonia just did. He stared at her with a blank face while she walked out of his room, then dropped his gaze to the mess on his ruined bed, sinking into despair because he had no idea gathering a group was this hard. After a while, Sonia and Roa's team was already outside, and the girl leaned in to tell Roa she'd applied to join his group. Then Sonia Clark leaned in and told the guy, "If you want, we can swap stats. Show me yours. I'll show you mine." Sonia was 17 and she sat at level 65. When the guy sized up the girl's stats, he realized her defense was pure quintessence, 8 times stronger than his, and Sonia clocked the shocker. This guy had 2 rare skills, something she'd never seen before. He stared at the girl, stunned because Ro was convinced every other adventurer felt the exact same way. But nah, she flat out denied it. And Sonia's seen tons of teams already, yet nothing like this has ever popped up. She also clocked that Roa didn't brag about it. He used his power to help her, not to chase a paycheck. Sonia beamed, praised the guy for what he'd done, and called him a genuinely kind, absolutely amazing person. The girl stared at Roa like he was a hero, and that praise instantly made Tom squirm. Roa wasn't used to that kind of spotlight, so embarrassment hit him hard. The blonde guy finally steadied his nerves and asked the girl where they'd go that day, but she just couldn't give him an answer. Then Roa pitched her E-ranked dungeons, and the moment the girl heard the rank, her eyes snapped wide open while the guy kept talking like nothing could stop him. If Sonia didn't mind, Roa already had the whole plan cooking. They couldn't stop imagining diving straight into the deepest part while that cursed frog memory still clung to their minds. In the village of Foil, 2 dungeons loomed. One was rank E, the other rank F. And a guy leaned in and told the girl, "If you smash the bosses in both, you'll earn a sweet achievement." Sony still had no achievement, so Roa decided to fix that fast. She wanted to boost the girl's status by awarding her the Conqueror of the First Dungeon achievement after they cleared the dungeons of rank E and rank F. Roa noticed the girl's face crumple at the idea of an E-rank dungeon. Then he told me he wouldn't push it, not after everything that happened. Sonia went quiet for ages, but in the end, she didn't turn him down. That dark mood vanished in seconds, and she grinned as she agreed to the guy's offer. No hesitation to march straight into the dungeons and take them on, because this time, Roa was coming with her. He stared at the girl's changed face, nodded as her consent clicked into place, and decided to hold his new magic for Sonya while Roa went on to open his sister's. At his current level, the first magic that caught his eye, he'd finally be able to get her. And that spell was called Fire Volley. It cost 50 levels, but the base damage was absolutely massive. Soon, the guy managed to unleash a blazing fire volley, and magical lights exploded around him, while the girl stared in shock. Roa leaned towards Sonya and told her the real twist of his power. He can burn through his levels, swapping them for fresh items and spells, and right now he'd already spent all 50 levels out of his 60. So yeah, Roa had finally reached level 10. And with a cocky grin, he told Sonya that if any attack landed on him, he'd be wiped out on the spot. Sonya heard that and screamed in total shock. Roa's been at it for ages, so he's got this no panic in that guy at all. Sonya watched his moves and realized just how insanely brave he was, and she couldn't shake the thought that she'd never, ever be able to do the same. Then the girl stepped in to stop the attack cold. No one was going to lay a hand on him. And Roa was fired up. At the entrance of one of the two dungeons, a guy and a girl stood staring ahead. With a grin, Roa stared down at his palm, ready to test the fire pillar magic he'd just snagged. The team was already buried deep in the dungeon when right along the way, Bistual wolves slunk into view as monsters, and the guy clocked them first, then instantly warned Sonya. They had to slam into every monster at once because Roa needed 4 seconds to strike and trigger her magic. And the short-haired girl grinned as she braced behind her shield. Now it was her turn to guard the guy. Sonya clutched her rock-solid, unbreakable shield and fought off the bestial monsters, stopping them cold so they couldn't get past her. Then she cracked her guard for a split second and shoved the monsters aside. Once the girl hauled the monsters off to the side, the guy squared up and launched his attack. Then he clocked that Sonya was handling her job perfectly. In the very next moment, Roa slings the magic spell Fire Spear and it rockets into the beast like monsters, wiping them out in one brutal strike. The girl stared in awe at the pile of fallen monsters, then she clocked it. 2 beast-like beasts wiped out in a single, crushing strike. She couldn't wrap her head around how fast Ro snatched them away, but the guy swore it wasn't just luck. It was all about his own skill. Roa told the girl she was amazing at pulling enemies in, and the second she heard it, embarrassment hit her. Cheeks flared red as she stammered, wanting desperately to thank him back. Right when they were about to finish talking, the kobold fighters snapped into view, perfectly timed, always showing up like it knew where they'd be, and Roa flung a fire spear straight at it. The monster got taken down fast. After a bit, the whole crew strolled through the dungeon like they owned the place until Roa's eyes snapped wide. They'd already hit the lower level. And yeah, it was way too fast. He asked her about that achievement, and she only had one shot she'd have to take on the dungeon boss herself because only a win would earn it. Roa also realized something wild just yesterday. He'd crushed the king frog, so he figured there was no dungeon boss lurking in there right now. Then Sonya fired a question at Roa. Where do the monsters come from? Roa had never even considered it. He'd only been focused on one thing: surviving. Sonya kicked off her explanation. Monsters weren't just random. They were born when demonic elements swirled into the air, and in places where those magical energies piled up thick, the strongest monsters came out fast. That's why the deeper he plunges into the dungeon, the nastier the foes get, stronger, sharper, and fueled by a surge of packed demonic energy. So yeah, Roa's beaten Frog King could crawl back to that very spot. And Sonya whispered the last words with a heavy, aching voice. Before long, the guy and the girl were standing right back at the lower dungeon entrance. Then, boom, the magic barrier flared up again, signaling the boss was waiting. Rowan saw the girl beside him shake from head to toe, terrified of the monster. She hadn't forgotten what just happened to her. Then the guy brought her back from panic, promising she had nothing to fear because he would never run off and abandon her. The moment she heard Roa say it, the trembling stopped cold. Then she flashed a bright grin at her teammate, and Sonya looked the blonde guy in the eye and told him she believed in him because with Roa backing her up, she felt genuinely happy. Right when their happy moment burst to life, the dungeon boss came charging in and the girl and the guy snapped into fighting stances instantly. Roa slammed a magic spell into place right away while Sonya kept the monster's blows at bay. Even after countless tries, Sonya still refused to give up on smashing the king frog because this monster looming over them was absolutely massive. Roa's eyes widened in disbelief as he realized the king frog was even bigger than the last boss. Right then, the king frog snapped its tongue out and lunged for an attack, but this time, everything changed. The girl planted her feet, raised her shield, and held the line with total confidence. She dropped to one knee in a blink, parried the monster's strike, and her quick move forced the attack to shift mid-motion. So the frog never managed to flick its tongue at the guy, and Roa stood there, cool as ice, totally unshaken by the monster's tongue. He lit up when he realized attacks couldn't touch him, and that made him fearless enough to test brand new magic. Then this guy snapped into a brand new magic style, and in just 3 seconds, he fired off the spell. Magic circles flared up around him, and Roa snapped into action, counting down to unleash the spell while the girl kept the monster at bay with relentless defense, stopping it cold from getting anywhere near Roa. Right after the countdown hit 0, 3 tense seconds crawled by, then the magic finally ignited. The blonde guy snapped open 3 magic circles and launched a blazing fire volley straight at the royal frog. A blazing fire volley tore toward the monster and slammed it from 3 angles at once. There was no dodging, just brutal magical hits. And when the blast landed, explosions erupted in every spot the flames struck. This time, the dungeon boss got wiped out for real gone in the blink of an eye. Sonia couldn't believe how fast it happened. Because the Frog King used to be an absolute menace, now it just took one single strike to crush it. Roa was stunned, fully expecting things to be tougher. Then reality hit. His brand new fire volley magic crushed enemies with a base damage that could drop their HP by a whopping 4,000. Then the system pinged him straight up after he crushed a tough opponent. And suddenly his level shot from 38 to 58, so Roa jumped 20 levels in one brutal sweep. Roa didn't realize experience points could shoot your level up that hard. Then the guy and the girl slapped hands, and the girl grinned as she told him about the achievement she just unlocked. Because Sonia had finally nailed her goal. But for him, the thrill isn't done. Roa flashed a grin and pulled his weapon. Last time they talked, he completely forgot. Then he snapped, furious, demanding they pull materials from the monster, and Sonia watched Roa's moves with this super awkward, uneasy look. That day's haul came pouring in 24 rank E magic stones, one single rank D stone, and around 10 royal frogskin pieces. All of it worth a fat paycheck once they sold the goods. Once the guy gathered everything he needed, all that was left was to slap it together and stash it in the item drawer. And Sonia couldn't stop smiling because that magic skill item box was insanely useful. The guy told the girl that if they stashed everything, they'd score tons of silver. Then he suddenly snapped, remembered something, and shouted for Sonia. Roa told Sonia he'd ditch Foil Village the very next day, and the blonde guy immediately pushed for an invite asking Sonia to team up with him for a D-rank dungeon. The boy and girl were still stuck in the village of Foil, but inside the tavern the whole team kept downing drinks then. Sonia snapped that it was time to get out. Roa's forces had swelled too much for this place to hold, and honestly, Roa could have said the exact same thing about Sonia. Roa was hovering at level 80 and Sonia was already at 82, so the guy figured they could finally handle D-rank work. The girl nodded like, yeah, makes sense. Right up until one big problem hit. They had zero clue where the D-ranked engine was, and Roa and Sonia were completely rocked by the news because they were only 2 weeks in, so they never even thought to check dungeons like that. So Sonia pushed the idea of asking around or hunting down clues by buying a card, but dungeon location maps were so rare, Rewa, that when he heard you could find info that way, he couldn't stop thinking about it. Then it hit him. He had the perfect idea, and he knew exactly where to go to get the information he needed. After a bit, they stumbled into an item store, and Carter flashed Roa an anxious, flattering grin, then immediately offered to help. Carter, still grinning, politely waved the guy through and showed him the stuff from the store, while Roa, spotting that black-haired guy, froze, shocked at how his whole vibe had shifted. Then Sonia slid in with them, asked about a product tied to Roa, and Carter stared at the stranger like the question hit him in the chest. The girl beamed at the guy and asked if he knew the seller, and Carter froze at that smile like his soul skipped a beat. Meanwhile, the guy's face went beet red from head to toe. But Roa shut Sonia down, flat, because he wasn't there for fun at all. He was only in the store to handle business. Carter kept grinning and peppered the guy with questions about a beautiful girl, then snapped at him in a full-on rage, and Roa finally saw Carter's true self come roaring back. But Roa didn't even flinch at the insults because the second Carter's map was brought up, she was all business he wanted that thing. And better yet, it should have led straight to dungeons. Carter muttered they had no maps, everyone wants them, so they'd sell out fast. Then he started throwing insults at Roa, right as his father burst into the room and the man reported they had cards. Then a black-haired man with an eye patch stormed up to his son and snapped, furious, that he must never insult customers again. Carter froze in terror and swallowed his father's warning. After a while, the man finally hauled the card to the team, then tossed them the map he'd once used as an adventurer. Sonia shot a glance at the map handwritten. They couldn't just snatch something that crucial, but the man still handed the card to Roa, a real apology for everything his son's mess had put him through. The man wanted a powerhouse partner to secure a better card, and he said it with a slick, smiling grin. Then Carter's father pointed them the way. If they wanted the next dungeon, they had to hit the city of Lamberg, right there in the northeast. It was a 2-day haul from the village of Foil, and when they finally had the route, Roa thanked the man and moved on. He told them they'd be out of the village the very next day, and as soon as Carter thought his father hadn't noticed yet, he shot the guy a sour look still. The man just grinned and took it in stride, and everyone could already feel how much quieter the village was about to get. Carter's father can't wait for their next meeting to see how much they've grown. Then the next day hits, and in the crack of dawn, sleepy Roa Yawn stumbles in, exhausted because all he wants is to sleep. But Sonia wouldn't leave him alone. She yanked him by the collar since he couldn't even stand up straight that early in the morning. And she kept strutting beside him with a bright grin, like she was having the best walk of her life. He finally understood this was the end, and they'd be gone from this place for good, and it crushed him. He'd been stuck for ages with skills that kept failing, until Roa suddenly unlocked a new one, and now he couldn't stop asking why he'd been forced to suffer and wait so long. Maybe it was Roa's grit that earned him the win. He shot his fist up to the sky, then once he finally left the village of Foil, he turned back and thanked her for every single year he spent there. After a while, the team found themselves miles away from the village, with a brutal stretch of road still waiting ahead toward the city. On their way, the crew stumbled into monsters like slugs, and Roa clocked it. This whole stretch was packed with weak ones. All because the demonic danger outside was barely even showing. They never should have dropped their guard because every once in a while a storm of magical elements would suddenly spill into the world, and that's exactly how powerful demons are born. He smirked at her words like he didn't even believe they'd be able to overpower those dungeon monsters then. Out of nowhere, a sharp sound yanked Roa's attention. A horse-drawn carriage came charging after them, barreling straight ahead. Roa's eyes widened in shock as Sonia spun around, curious to see what was chasing them. The girl driving the cart kept shouting for help, terrified out of her mind as she gripped the reins with white-knuckled hands. Tears streamed as she begged for help because someone was hunting to wipe her out, and even in total panic, she never once let go of the cart's controls. The whole team froze at the scream for help, then Roa spotted it. Their wagon was being hunted by a demon. The girl and the guy snapped into a fighting stance, ready to smash whatever came charging next. But right as the wagon rolled up and the monster came into view, they finally spotted the demon massive, built like a steel bear ready to crush them. The monster's name was Grizzly Bear, and if they wanted to win, they'd better be at least level 130. Seeing the Grizzly Bear's terrifying traits, the guy and the girl froze in pure shock because the demon's power was almost twice theirs, and fear hit them hard. On their way to the city, everything went sideways and an accident hit. And then they stumbled on a massive bear charging after a girl, looking absolutely terrifying. Sonia trembled with pure terror, but even so, she still forced herself to draw the monster's attention while Roa was casting the spell, yet the guy kept trying to steady her before she shattered. He told the girl he could strike the monster even without a lure, and that grizzly bear didn't need coaxing at all. Right away, Roa started firing up the Fire Volley spell. The Fire Volley fighters strike the grizzly bear from 3 angles at once, trapping the monster so it can't dodge a single hit. The moment that Grizzly finally lumbered off, the unknown girl froze in shock. She couldn't believe she'd been left alone. Sonia praised the guy, and Roa got a system ping for racking up extra experience from beating a tough opponent because he was bonded, so he shot up 2 levels and hit level 80. She sprinted across the distance toward her rescuers, shouting "thank you" at the top of her lungs, and when she finally reached the team, she clung to Roa with all her might, while the terrified stranger shook with relief, grateful they'd just saved her life. Still trembling with fear, the girl choked out her name, Masha, and tears spilled as she confessed she really thought a bear was about to eliminate her. And even though Roa was mortified, he didn't shove her away. But Sonia exploded with fury. Masha heard the girl snap that she didn't respect the man who saved her life, not if he had that kind of face while hugging her. With a warm smile, the girl pressed a cloth handkerchief into Masha's hands to wipe away her tears, and Sonia told her she'd ruin that pretty face. So Masha stared at her with admiration, then thanked her sweetly. After wiping her tears away, Masha burst out to the team. "I'm a merchant," then admitted she was traveling a road she knew until it vanished beneath her feet. She meant to reach Lamberg, but she wound up going nowhere, and when Roa realized where she was trying to get, shock hit him like a punch. At that point, they were headed for Lamberg too, so the guy shot off an invite and asked Masha to come along. She was already ready to say yes with a smile until one tiny problem crashed the moment. Her cart's back was stuffed tight with goods, so there was zero space left for anything else. So in Lamberg, where travelers and adventurers swarm, she packed every last supply she could carry, but Roa didn't even blink. None of it fazed him at all. The guy closed in on the cart and started getting ready to cast magic. At that exact moment, almost every single item vanished from the cart and got shoved straight into the Roa's little box, leaving Masha frozen in pure shock at the sheer suddenness of it all. The girl panicked, convinced every last thing was gone until the guy stepped in and soothed her, telling Masha he'd only stashed the goods in the item drawer so she wouldn't have to worry at all. Masha instantly stared in awe at his skills. Somehow those bales of goods still slid perfectly into the box, like it was magic. And with Masha grinning at Roa, Anya just couldn't hold back the compliments either, because the praise hit so hard that Roa basically felt like a trained dog. Then the guy hit on an idea since there was fresh space in the back of the wagon. Roa packed the hay into a tight bale and left that bale waiting back there. That's how we finally found a place to crash. Roa dropped into the wagon and zonked out instantly. Masha stared at him in awe, thinking, magic takes so much energy. But Sonia shot back, nah. Roa wasn't some great spell slinger, he was just a sleep addict. Then they rolled straight into Lamberg by now. The girls and the guy had already chewed through most of the road, while Masha and Sonia kicked back with tea by the campfire, and Roa zoned out and slept the whole way. Right then, the guy jerked awake from his sleep once they rolled into Lamberg. The bustling city burst into view like a stunning painting. Roa shot upright from his sleeping spot, staring like a stunned deer. He'd never seen so many people packed into one building, and Masha clocked it too. This was the first time their team had landed in Lamberg, where adventurers set up shop because the city never ran out of requests. He handed the girl a thank you roll for the carriage, then told her they'd walk the rest of the way. Masha nodded, and she pulled the cart to a stop. After he jumped down from the cart, he blasted magic and dropped the girl's stolen things right back where they belonged. Masha stared, absolutely awestruck. Then the girl strode up to the guy. Masha's eyes sparkled as she realized Roa's magic was working like a charm, and she begged him to come with her, but Sonia snapped back right away. Roa's with me. Masha felt crushed with regret, but she still had to keep moving, so there was a real chance they'd cross paths somewhere else. Then the girl dashed off with a goodbye, convinced they'd invite her to visit once they'd become legendary adventurers, so Roa followed suit and said goodbye to Masha too. After a bit of wandering, the crew finally crashed into Lamberg's tavern, and Sonia wasted no time. She grilled Roa about the inn's rooms, because if they're sleeping here for a couple nights, they're totally saving money by sharing one room between two. The moment he heard about the common room, he shut it down on the spot. He'd already decided to rent 2 rooms, even if it cost them more, so he couldn't wrap his head around why he should have said no if she didn't mind. But Roa refused straight up because he knew he wouldn't get a good night's sleep in the morning. And right to Sonia's face, he snapped that he wouldn't let a beautiful girl like her stay huddled in the same room with him. Sonia froze, utterly thrown off by what he said. Then heat shot straight into her cheeks as an embarrassed blush flooded her face. The girl clapped her hands over her cheeks, mortified because she never meant for it to go that far. But the guy kept pushing with stubborn intent to block her from even thinking about the common room until the inn's employee snapped, furious at what they were doing. They can actually make a living off it. Then the very next day, they're heading straight into the dungeon to explore. The guy promised Sonia that once they cleared the dungeon, they'd cash out the loot so she didn't have to worry about a single coin, and the words hit her hard as she went silent. Then she muttered to herself that her plan had blown up, and Roa, he was out here acting like a perfect gentleman, totally missing the point. As the guy still couldn't figure out why she was snapping, he just assumed she had a stomachache. The very next day, the sky turned gorgeous and bright sunlight blazed down on the street, where low buildings lined up in a neat row like they were waiting for something to happen. Sonia greeted Roa with a cheerful good morning, then told him she'd gotten word from the guild while he was still out cold and that the D-rank dungeon is out beyond the city walls. The young man clocked it. She was up early again, and Sonia's eyes snapped to his hair, saying he looked insanely energetic since he'd woken up with that same style. He suddenly looked like a total stranger. After a quick stretch of travel, the couple finally hit their destination. There it was, the D-rank dungeon looming ahead, and the girl shot her hand toward the entrance like, right there. The dungeon entrance towered over them, guarded by massive columns, and somehow that didn't scare the small team one bit. Sonia realized this even a D-ranked dungeon felt totally different from the ones before, and Roa couldn't help but grin because walking into a dungeon for the first time always hits like pure excitement. Overwhelmed with gratitude for saving her, the girl urged the guy to take off, leave her behind, and run the moment danger showed up. Sonia shut her eyes and swore to herself she could take on anything. Yes, even throw away her own life to protect the person who once saved her. The girl pressed a hand to her heart, stared straight at the young man, and boldly repeated that she wasn't sorry to give her life for someone else. He didn't want to hear a word of it. He snapped back that his partner didn't need to push that kind of determination on him, because Sonia was the one thing he refused to lose, and he cut her off mid-sentence. No matter what, he lit up with inspiration and swore that together they'd pull out every stop to clear the D-rank dungeon, and their adventure was about to get wildly exciting. Corridors kept trading places one after another, and the whole area felt eerily empty because all it had were stairs and winding passageways. As the young man scanned their surroundings, he realized this place was downright gloomy. Sonia even said it felt like a totally abandoned sewer, with murky water pooling everywhere and tunnels that looked just like giant pipes. The girl blurted out that some dungeons don't match their opponents fairly, and she was sure this one was packed with water monsters. Roa replayed everything he'd just heard. Some attributes crushed harder, while others robbed power. Good ones doubled the damage, and bad ones cut it in half. Roa flicked back through what he knew about his own moves, and it hit him those fire spears and fireballs wouldn't do him any favors out there, and every time he threw a fireball, it chewed up too much power, so he couldn't even spread his strength across his attacks. The young man had no idea if 2 shots would be enough to take down the monster, but since he'd never even seen a water beast before, he decided he'd better meet it ASAP. The girl yanked Roa back to reality, yelling that an enemy had just stepped into their path, then slid into a defensive stance ready to fight, while Sonia warned them the monster was wearing red armor. So the young man figured they'd be going toe-to-toe with a giant crab, though he couldn't help being weirdly amused by how ridiculous that sounded. But that couple spotted something the guy never saw coming. The monster was a giant, heavily armored crab, and the recommended level to beat it was 150th. Then it lunged into the attack. So Roa barked at Sonya to draw the guy's focus right while he geared up to strike. The girl fired off her homing skill. Every enemy attack snapped right onto her like the battlefield itself locked in, while her movement speed surged to nearly 1.5 times faster. The crab's claw actually snapped into Sonya's shield, but she held firm and walked away untouched. Then she whipped around to the young man behind her, already poised, ready to slash back at the enemy. The fireball slammed right into the target, blasted the armored crab with real damage, and still it couldn't stop it. The girl saw the monster charging in for round 2 and snapped, "That one hit won't be the end." And the young man instantly caught on, bracing himself to slam another blow and push this duel to its final moment. With magic back in his hands, he launched another assault on the massive monster, and this hit tore way deeper than before. Sonya saw their opponent crumple to the ground, and Robia immediately cheered. Good, finally then reality hit. There was zero strength left to throw another attack. Distracted for a split second, the young man didn't even see the claw come slashing in right before it almost snapped shut on him. Sonya sprinted in to help and slammed down her next skill, Steel Wall, boosting her defense to nearly double. The girl smirked a little, spun toward the guy, and basically said, "I bought you around 10 seconds, use it to recover after that attack." And Roa thanked her and chugged a potion to speed his healing. After he chugged what was in the bottle, he finally saw it. This girl standing her ground, braced behind a shield as the monster crashed at her. With his power roaring back, Roa grinned and yelled at the monster that he'd burn him to a crisp. He hurled yet another fireball at the armored crab, and this time the blast slammed true, smashing the water monster to pieces. Roa tore through that brutal opponent, pocketed a huge chunk of experience, and just like that jumped from level 80 straight up to 82. The girl cheered that they finally crushed a monster that was way too tough, then yelled that it was time to grab the magic stones. Roy admitted he needed up to 3 spells to bring it down, but he was only sitting on 2. He said he'd need totally new items for the new spells. So yeah, it meant a mountain of work then. Sonya turned to Ruea and asked if she wanted to learn lightning magic. The guy's eyes lit up a little and he said, "Yeah, there's something I've wanted for ages, and I'd love to finally get it." That kid was talking about lightning throw, low energy cost, deadly high base damage, and it was so busted it could have been worth up to 50 levels. Compared to fireballs, this lightning blast hit lower. But you could sling it again and again, so the girl stalled for a beat after hearing the young man speak. Lightning was pure profit and power, but there was a catch: it chewed up way too many levels. Sonya crunched the numbers and warned that once Roa dropped by 50, he'd be left with just 32. One rough hit could kill him, so even his partner started to question if that risk was insane. He decided to lift her spirits, told her he was thrilled she said that, and begged her not to stress over him because he wanted her to keep protecting him and taking care of him. Roa felt mortified by his own confession, but he thanked his partner, and the second he did, her cheeks flared red still. She grinned like she'd just won something huge. After the talk, the young man still managed to master the lightning throw. Roa stared at his palm and blurted that he couldn't wait to see how far this new magic could take them, especially with Sonya. The young man urged the girl to push deeper into the dungeon, and the moment he said it, she nodded yes, so the whole team kept charging forward. Empty corridors yawned open in front of the couple again, dragging the travelers deeper and deeper into the dungeon, until Sonya felt the darkness swallow the light. There was clearly barely any lighting down there. The girl moved in and warned him that walking in the dark is asking for trouble, so they needed to stick close. Then the guy tensed up and admitted an ambush could be lurking out there, and that thought scared the hell out of him. Roa already knew exactly what to do next. He fully expected to fire off that light skill when moments like these hit. Suddenly the corridor flared so bright the air seemed to glow, and the young man grinned at Sonya, asking if he'd finally solved the problem, while she clearly expected something else because the light just kept pouring brighter around them. Deciding to seize her chance again, the girl grabbed onto the guy once more and insisted she was still a bit cold so they should get even closer. The guy nodded and said it was totally fine. Once again, Roa ignored his partner's expectations and snapped a pile of firewood into existence from the item drawer. Ignition crackled in the young man's hands. He sparked a little flame, not for show because he wasn't done yet. When the pot finally appeared, Roa used the drinking water skill to purify the water. He practically strutted with pride because he remembered to grab the camp kit, and that little move made the dungeon trip way easier. While the girl who expected him to do something else huffed, then reluctantly nodded and went along. Sonya gave up on her pointless attempts to snag the young man's attention, then took a cautious sip from her mug, fully expecting nothing special at all. To everyone's shock, the girl loved what was in her cup so much that she leaned in and demanded to know what kind of delicious tea it was. He admitted he'd secretly grabbed this variety back when he still had money, guessing the former noblewoman would actually enjoy something like this while Sonya watched, stunned by how sweet and surprisingly gallant the young man sounded. Roa told Sonya not to freak out because he only did it since nobody else was standing beside him being right next to Sonya. And that made her partner absolutely melt, flattered to the bone. Right as the couple's idol was set to shine, a monster erupted onto a nearby wall and cut everything short, and the ever-dying squid showed up at the same rank and level as the crab they just wiped out. Sonya's breath caught when a massive tentacle burst out of nowhere, snatched her up and slammed her against the ceiling. Then she screamed as pain shot through her head. Roha didn't lose his cool. He clocked the situation instantly this time. The danger wasn't his, it was his partner's, and she couldn't pull herself through on her own. The young man unleashed his brand new skill, lightning throw, and the tentacle instantly snapped open, freeing the captive, who finally hit the ground without a scratch. The squid splashed down into the water, and just like that, the enemy was wiped out in seconds. Sonya was completely safe, and she lit up, praising Roa for that perfect shot. Because the opponent was way higher level, every hit instantly pumped Roa's experience, shot him from level 32 straight to 55, and the guy could barely contain his joy at the win. He said, "In a mess like this, we've got to fake the cast's time," and then the girl immediately turned and started thanking the young man for his next rescue, praising Roa's magic as if it was pure magic. He was so relieved that the moment it hit him, his brain started sprinting through every choice because when it came to sheer damage, a fireball could be the perfect answer, but only if you match the right magic to the situation. Sonya couldn't help but smile at the whole mess, then said Roa looked like a happy little kid who was secretly dreaming about what the future might bring. That comparison didn't even rattle him. He just figured she didn't get how dead serious he truly was. Roa stared at his palm and realized for the first time how thrilling it was to fight not alone but with someone at his side. And the guy couldn't stop grinning because he was getting stronger and stronger. The young man leaned towards Sonya and asked, right out, if his face somehow gave away that he used to be a little boy. And at first, Roa totally didn't get what he meant. Then her cheeks flared as she blushed and clamped a hand over her mouth because she didn't want to burst out laughing at him. Sonya couldn't hold it in for long after just a couple seconds. She burst into laughter at the way the young man's face twisted with those ridiculous expressions, tears streaming down his cheeks as she cracked him up. Sonya erupted in loud laughter, likening Roa to a slime twisted up like a rag, and Roa's shocked at how wild that image was because even he felt a little creeped out by the comparison. When the couple finally slipped back into the city, the sky was already pitch black. Night had fully swallowed everything. While they were locked in that dungeon, they raked in up to 20 rank D magic stones, and each one was worth a whopping 2,000. Sonya and Roa grinned at the haul they'd gathered, dumped the whole pile on the counter, and demanded the cashier tally it up, time to cash out their loot. The girl at the table stared at 2 bags of stones, shocked that only 2 people managed to grab them, and the employee hurried over with an apology, then demanded the couple flash their guild card so he could confirm they were really members. Roa handed the girl the card with a grin, but she took it like it might explode, still not believing 2 people could pull off something this huge. The employee studied the map in detail, yet it turned up nothing remarkable at all. Roa stared at the couple again, and the girl demanded to know if it was really true. Had they really gotten that many ranked D magic stones themselves? Roa didn't even flinch. He just shrugged and said they hadn't stolen a thing from anyone. But the girl trusted the young man and stormed into a new room to call an appraiser. She needed the stones they'd dragged up from the dungeon verified for real. Even though Roa didn't say a word, fury burned at being pinned as a thief and a liar again and again because in his mind he already looked pathetic. So Sonya rushed in, trying to lift his spirits and swear that none of it was true. The girls bragged that they were E-rank adventurers who had just rolled into Landberg City. And honestly, with stats like that, nobody buys it because pulling off results like that as a tiny team is almost unheard of. He was slumped so hard he looked done for. So the girl grabbed his collar, shook him side to side, and shouted that he was still strong. The employee apologized for the delay and hurried back to the couple with the appraisers. The guy had a heavy bias, so we took a step back and grilled the truth. Were those magic stones really not stolen? The man stared at the stones for ages, turning them over and verifying every detail to prove where they came from while Roa and Sonya just stood there holding their breath. The young man fumed a little, but the girl grinned, certain they weren't telling lies. After a quick check, the man dropped his stone and stared the couple down, and right then the girl and the guys felt their confidence wobble. After a while, a grin cracked across the man's face. He swore the stones could be stored away, and that the magic stones you harvest from monsters would eventually start to break down, though that downfall hasn't even begun yet. And that stone condition meant one thing. Fresh harvest was coming. The girl with glasses stared in pure shock. She blurted out an instant apology for her behavior full of guilt, then admitted she'd never seen people of the same rank as that couple get handed such a huge sum, and those words dragged Roa's mood even lower. Sony told the guy, "Next time you're trying to move cities, slow that order down and temper it." And the young man nodded, grinning because in that good mood he ended up fighting like crazy. That girl still carried guilt in her chest, so she slapped the coins down in front of her and promised she'd buy those magic stones back at a slightly higher price as compensation. And Roa practically lit up with pure delight. The man who loved those magic stones leaned in and demanded why the couple was desperate for money. Roa shot back that they just needed it to survive. Even though the whole adventure started for cash, the young man still soaked up the grind and loved leveling up, and when the other guy heard that, A small smile tugged at his lips. Without missing a beat, the appraiser decided that next time, Sonia and Roa were heading into the monster lair, no questions asked. At first, he couldn't figure out why they'd even come here until the man leaned in and said, "When monsters crowd together, you can sometimes find that kind of chaos in dungeons above the D rank, but only if you're certain you can handle it." Sonia stared at Roa and grilled him on what he thought, like, should they even dare to try going to places like that? Roa didn't hesitate for a second and jumped at the idea. The kid knew the truth: beat a stronger monster and you'd rack up way more experience. So there was no choice, they had to push into one of those places. They stepped back into the dungeon, greeted by the same shadowy hallways and twisting passages, and Roa practically fizzed with excitement, pushing his partner to tell him if she'd ever seen a monster lair, and dying to know how many monsters were hiding in there. He threw his arms wide, showing Sonia exactly how many monsters he believed were lurking for them, while Roa only wanted one thing: meet them fast, then crush every last one. Sonia shot him a look and begged him to rein it in, because he'd started acting like a little kid again. The girl paused, thought it through, and said, "I've never even met someone like you, but I'm certain wiping out monsters is the fastest way to level up." Roas's partner panicked. Too many monsters could choke the work of Magic Room, so Roas calmed them down, saying that even with them near the end, he'd been scanning the skill list and spotted some spells that could actually help. One of those skills was Thunderbolt, built to blast enemies from way out of range, but it gouged your power as hard as 150 levels. And each use hits for at least 7,000 damage by burning 400 units of strength. Sonia clocked that the magic spread through a huge area, then Roa chimed in that it didn't just hit wide, it also dealt serious basic damage. But the guy also warned her this ability's cooldown was brutal and the power drain was no joke. Worse, the levels weren't even there to raise. Roa Sonia remembered it all right now. Her partner only had his 101st level. Still, the young man didn't get discouraged. There was nowhere to rush to, so he kept pushing his progress step by step until he finally reached the level he needed to unlock the skill. Roa was digging through magic when he stumbled on a key power one that would finally give him the edge to use skills. He jabbed at a magic ring that cost a whopping 50 levels, promising to crank up your skill power by 400 units. Sonia couldn't hide her awe, saying the ring was totally worth pouring so many levels into. And when the young man nodded, he didn't overthink it. He slapped down 50 levels, muttered that he had no choice, and got to forging the ring right away. Right after Roa forged the magic ring, he slipped it onto his own finger and rushed it straight to Sonia, firing off, "So, what do you think?" And the second she saw how good he looked, she couldn't resist and decided she just had to reach out and touch him. As partner blushed and gently took the young man's palm in her own, she leaned in and praised how beautiful his hands were, then teased that any ring on those fingers would look absolutely stunning. The young man blushed at the compliment, but before he could even speak, an endlessly dying squid slid in behind them, one he'd once knocked out with a single blow, only this time it got wiped out fast. Time flew by and the couple, locked in on grinding, stayed in the dungeon for days straight to level up. After their first day, the duo raked in 25 rank D magic stones and shot their levels up fast. Then the moment Sonia hit level 130, the hard-hitting monsters suddenly stopped handing her any more experience. By the time the second day was over, the duo had hauled in 18 more magic stones and both smashed through to the 150th level. By the third day, Roa had already unlocked Thunderbolt. Then he realized the terrible catch: he still needed one more level or the whole thing would eat him alive, because if he dumped 150 levels, he'd be left with nothing at all. Roa didn't waste a second. He tore through the armored crab, and right after that he shot up to level 151, all because pure fury drove him, and he felt zero guilt for what he'd done. At last, after he got what he wished for, the young man unlocked a brand new power and seized the Thunderbolt. Now he can blast with fire and also hurl lightning with deadly control, wielding Thunderbolt like it's his own. Even though he slid back to level 1, it didn't shake him one bit, because he'd already locked in the exact skills he'd need to climb right back fast. And yeah, Roa kept his power steady with a magic ring that let him stay strong enough to fire off his skills. Sonia let out a small smile and murmured that nobody at the first level is happier than her partner. The girl practically buzzed with excitement, counting down to finally witnessing strong magic in action, while Roa grinned too, already convinced they had to pull together a team. But when he realized he couldn't apply to create a group, shock hit him hard. Sonia flat out said you can't form a team when the members' levels are wildly mismatched if the gap tops 10. It gets unfair fast because the lower levels barely matter, hiding in the shadows of the stronger guys. Roa finally got what his partner was saying, then shot back that he'd have to crank his power level back up to that same target again. The girl steadied the young man and promised him he'd make it if she just pitched in a bit, so she leaned close and asked him to give her a little time. Sonia grabbed her shield and promised she'd bring monsters along so Roa could wipe them out with ease. The young man insisted that 3 or 4 monsters were all he needed, so the girl wouldn't have to gamble her life just to drag in a whole swarm. While Sonia was gone, Roa stared at his own numbers and couldn't believe how fast his levels had skyrocketed back in the village. He'd only been grinding to barely reach the 50th level. Staring at his own hands, the young man couldn't stop thinking about how this brand new magic would spike his level. Would it shoot him up by 50, maybe 60, and let him wipe out every monster in one brutal strike? Roa wiped the dust from his fists, grinning as he eyed the monster fight ahead, dreaming that Sonia would come back to him right away. After a moment, Rua caught the girl's voice right behind him, and she was back fast, but when he glanced at Sony, the guy only saw 2 monsters, even though he'd told them to bring 3 or 4. But when the girl finally came up to him, Roa saw it. She was sprinting straight toward him, terrified, with monsters hot on her heels. Sonia shrieked at the young man to help right now, and then Roa's stomach dropped. It wasn't 2 monsters. It was like 8 of them. He stared there, stunned so hard he couldn't even speak. Without wasting another second, the guy blurted to his partner that he was about to start training with a new skill, so she had to sprint up and get right beside him. And Sonia pushed herself harder, racing to the young man. A seal snapped onto the floor, and Rafaya charged into attack mode only to realize his brand new skill took him 7 long seconds to fire. Because magic is built to splash area damage, one wrong timing can mean you're not just missing monsters, you're leaving them right in your face if you strike too late. Roa clocked how long Sonia would take to reach him, then sprang into action, prepping to unleash the skill. The guy noticed the girl's stamina was basically gone. She was sprinting, but her legs were giving out fast, and Sonia had already pushed hard enough that she'd hit her limit. Roa stayed dead serious, stuck on one question: could they pull everything off in time and keep both of them from getting hurt? Sonia sprinted forward, yelling at Roa to stop stalling and strike immediately because the monsters closing in were already terrifying her, and they were right on her heels. She was drowning in despair, tears blazing down her cheeks as she yelled, "I won't make it! I won't escape!" Panic and terror seized her mind, but she still kept sprinting toward her partner. Roa stayed ice calm, grinning like he already knew the outcome. 2 seconds left, and then he'd slam into the enemies. Sonia was almost there, but the guy held his ground. He waited until she was right beside him, because he only had 1 second left. Yelling at Sonia to jump, he watched the girl snap to it. She hurled her shield aside and leapt straight toward her partner. Roa snatched the girl's body with one hand, and with the other, he was already lining up a strike at the pack of monsters that were about to swarm the crowd. With her fresh Thunderbolt skill igniting her magic, she hurled a surge of lightning right at the monstrous enemies, closing in fast and angrier by the second. Lightning slammed into every opponent at the same time, all close enough to get hit, and the young man's summoned seal shot skyward, crackling out fresh lightning bolts. Every monster that tore into the girl was getting puppeted by the fierce magic Roa blasted straight at them. Sonia, stuck in awe by the spectacle, couldn't believe that punch landed with real force. Her tears vanished like smolders, replaced by a shy little blush, and when she looked at Roa, she saw the chilling focus in his eyes, locked onto their threat. After they crushed every monster at once, windows shaped like the young man burst into view in front of the couple, and right then, all Roa's stats started skyrocketing. Roa Foil shot straight into the 110th level, and his health and defense skyrocketed. Then the sheer power it demanded to use his skills blew past every expectation he had. Sonia stared in pure awe, and all she could blurt out was, "This is incredible!" While Roa's smile burned bright because he couldn't believe it. From the very first level, he instantly shot up to the 110th. Reality smashed every one of his expectations, and even the guy couldn't help it. Pure happiness lit his face with a shy blush, while the girl praised her partner for mowing down up to 8 monsters in a single strike. Roa just said he was relieved Sonia was okay and that nothing bad had happened to her, while Sonia's guilt crashed down on her. She shut her eyes tight, knowing this danger was all because of her. He only said, "Don't worry now, everything's gone perfectly." And with the girl's help, Roa finally racked up a ton of experience. Looking back, the young man stared at the floor and said, "Don't worry, we're set for cash soon. Those monsters left behind a mountain of magic stones." Roa didn't even bother cramming every stone into a bag. She slammed them the whole pile together with magic and kept them locked in the inventory. Sonia gushed that Roa was an amazing person. Then she said that with the guy's magic, cleaning her room would be a breeze, while Guy just stood there, completely lost, like, "Wait, is that a compliment?" Once every last stone was gathered, the couple suddenly heard desperate cries for help coming from a pitch-black corridor. Roa even swore it sounded like a human voice calling his name. They sprinted straight toward the sound, the guy and girl racing to rescue whoever was trapped, because that broadcast was only coming from one place, meaning one person was begging for help. Roa spotted a man in pure panic, battling a monster, and the second the man saw them rush in for help, he begged them to finish it fast. The lone adventurer was in full panic because monsters closed in from every side, and he finally realized he couldn't survive on his own, so he shouted for help. Sonia stared at the stranger and clocked the injuries right away. Roa didn't hesitate for even a second and rushed in to help him. Roa ordered Sonia to round every enemy into one massive pile, and the girl's partner couldn't wait. He begged to use his brand new skill again, eyes already darting as he guessed the attack range. With the Thunderer's lightning in hand, Roa struck once and wiped out every monster in a single blast, then realized that power could spell trouble for an innocent stranger. The lone adventurer stared in disbelief as Roa mowed down monster after monster with terrifying ease and speed, something he'd never seen before, and he couldn't wrap his head around the fact that it was all coming from just one guy. Closing in on the stranger, Roa asked if he was okay because the adventurer was drenched in blood. The guy just smiled, thanked Roa, and swore he was fine. Thanks to him. When the stranger stared at Roa, he saw those insane stats skyrocket because the kid's level had jumped to 121 in a flash. The stranger blinked in shock at how fast the young man's power was rising, blurting out how amazed he was only for Roa to snap, "Just drop it." Because after stomping so many monsters, he shouldn't be surprised anymore. The stranger thanked his rescuers, hauled them to a nearby building to get them treated, and once the man saw he was finally safe, he lit up with relief, then told the couple to order anything they wanted because he'd cover the whole bill no matter what it cost. Roa snapped, asking if the stranger was really so certain because from the young man's view, they hadn't done anything big at all. But that couldn't be farther from the truth. They'd helped save his life, and that's why his gratitude burned so bright. A little later, the stranger finally apologized for keeping his name secret. Turns out the young man was Eric, and yeah, he was a D-rank adventurer. The girl across from us introduced herself too. And Sonia even told me the name of the guy who saved Eric. She described him like a man with an appetite for life, and Roa blinked in surprise at that take, but he didn't seem to care. Eric spun toward the guy and told him, "Yeah, you might look young, but trust me, you're a seasoned adventurer." While the young man pressed him for Roa's rank, he explained that to cast serious magic you needed at least a C rank. So Roa paused mid-bite, looked up at him and said, "I'm only E." Eric froze in disbelief and demanded the man stop spinning lies because Roa absolutely couldn't have a rank lower than the youngest person. Then the man pushed, asking if he'd only just started adventuring, and Roa shut that down hard by making it clear he'd been doing this for ages. Sonia cut into the conversation and said the young man's situation was a nightmare to even put into words because he never laughed at anyone, and that made him a genuinely good person. Eric was totally thrown off. Roa decided to press Eric why was he trapped alone in the dungeon, away from his crew, and Eric finally admitted it. He used to be in the group, but he'd bailed on them recently. Eric confessed he got booted because he couldn't handle the competition he swore he could survive on his own. But that confidence was a mistake that threw him straight into danger. Roa shrugged it off, saying that kind of story happens to adventurers all the time, and Eric sank lower, muttering that maybe he was never meant for teamwork or even adventure at all. The girl decided to lift his spirits, told him not to quit, and right then, boom, Eric stepped in, offering her a spot to team up with him and form a group. Sonia's face tightened the second she saw how the girl reacted to the proposal, and the room went dead silent. Eric caught it instantly and told her, clear as day, that he was only joking, because he knew she wouldn't leave Roa standing there. He said it straight up once you hit the D rank. Quitting that kind of adventure is basically normal because everyone does it. And even now, Eric didn't want to chase anything anymore since the thrills were gone and it just didn't feel fun anymore. The young man blurted that he'd rather keep running the family business and selling tools than get himself killed in some dungeon. And Roa shot back that the shop is a great choice too, because all that hard-earned knowledge from past adventures can make a real difference right there. Roa pushed him to say how long he'd been in Lombard City, and once Eric admitted he'd never even been to the lower level of the local dungeon, Roa realized he had no clue about the boss at all. Roa didn't know anything except this some C-ranked monster could lurk on the dungeon's lower floor, and if he and Sonia were really going to take him on, Roa knew he'd need magic strong enough to end it with one brutal hit. Eric told them, "If you want higher ranks, you've got to grab more jobs from the guild, and from what I can tell, you shouldn't draw too much attention." He warned that big, tough men make perfect targets, so you'd better watch your back and never mess with strangers. Roa shot back that nothing scared him. He'd already wrestled with enough hardship to get used to it. Eric gave a quick laugh and said the kid looked like he was about to step into the same kind of trouble all over again. Inside the tavern, the guests keep chatting, and Eric leans into the staff, demanding they bring out a few more glasses for everyone to keep drinking. The next morning, Roa shot up with a light heart. Everything had been slowly turning around for the better. He'd laughed the night before with great company, and he woke up in the morning to that gentle pastel calm. He rubbed his eyes, stunned that morning had come so fast like he couldn't even remember how he got into bed. Last night dragged on because Roa stuffed himself with food and drinks for that hard-earned rest, but just when he was finally settling in, a voice ripped him out of his thoughts. As Roas rolled onto his side, he realized he wasn't alone in bed. His partner was right there, fast asleep beside him. She cracked her eyes open and froze there. Inches from her was a guy lying right beside her as if he'd fallen there too. And when her eyes shut again, Sonia figured she must be dreaming. So she mumbled that she loved the dream and dropped right back into sleep. But he couldn't stay still. He was stunned to be sharing the same bed with her. So Rose snapped up out of bed and hurried away from her in an instant. The young man sprang into action, yanking the blanket up and down to confirm everything was right. Sonia didn't wake at all, so Roa let out a calm breath and watched in relief. He demanded they check, both of them were covered, and there was nothing between them. Then the kid started slapping his own body like crazy, and the girl finally jolted awake anyway. Sonia snapped awake, baffled and shocked she wasn't in her own room anymore, and Roa rushed to soothe her, claiming he probably carried her there right as he collapsed beside her and fell asleep. She couldn't calm down because the truth hit hard. She'd been sleeping right next to Roa all this time, and that dream she saw him in wasn't a dream at all. He told her not to worry because nothing bad had happened. Just two exhausted souls falling asleep side by side. Monia refused to hear another word, ripped out of the room and smashed through the front door, leaving Roka totally stunned. Because in his mind, he'd acted like a true gentleman, yet the girl vanished in a flash, and he couldn't wrap his head around what she wanted. After a while, the couple headed to the guild, and the moment they stepped in, that same girl was there again, ready to accept magic stones from. The girl with glasses leaned in and told me Eric had just been to the guild, and she even spilled what went down, how that couple saved him with powerful magic. The girl clocked Sonia and Roa's jitters right away, so she leaned in and asked if they'd actually slept normally last night. Then the guild girl swept in and begged the couple for their cards, promising she'd boost both their ranks by handing them the D. Broadway practically beamed at the news, and even at first he didn't buy it from anyone until the girl with glasses leaned in and swore the couple had earned their promotion by hauling in a ton of magic stones and wiping out a whole bunch of monsters. After snatching the new card from the guild, Ro grinned silver at last and rubbed it in, that all his grind hadn't been for nothing. Before, Roa was just a novice, but now, after the rank upgrade, his title has been promoted to wizard. And the girl with the glasses tells him straight, go to the errand board, check the guild's tasks, and get moving. The board was already packed with people right after the guild just updated the list, so this couple was about to stumble into some seriously juicy tasks. Sonia marched up to the blackboard, tapped it at a specific task, and told Roa he had to tear through a whole layer of monsters. Roa stared at the stand and clocked it. 150,000 was waiting for whoever finished this assignment. Sonia also clocked where they had to head next, a rank D dungeon, level 6, and she could tell it was scary territory because he and Roa had never stepped into a place like that before. That guy promised them they'd pull it off because after their last journey, he racked up the levels they needed to handle anything. With a task sheet in hand, the couple got cut off by a crowd, and their boss barked at Roa to drop the assignment because they were already eyeing it for themselves. The dark-haired guy smirked and told the couple they'd never finish this assignment. Rumors or no rumors. Sonia trembled with fear and couldn't get a single word out while Rola stared, shocked that these strangers had the nerve to act like that. Roa shot back, wait, what rumors are you talking about, and why does that rude guy want to snatch a job that Sonia and I already took? The stranger blinked, totally thrown that they didn't even know the gossip about themselves. The leader said rumors are swirling. There's a secret crew where one protector can't strike, and a magician just ends it all with a single blow. Sonia heard how strangers talked about her, and her stomach dropped. She felt insulted and panicked, like the words were aimed straight at her. Roa snapped that they wouldn't stand for it and still planned to take the first job they found because that monster lair was exactly what they needed. The leader refused to quit. He lunged to snatch the task by force, but Roa was lightning fast and he never even got the chance to grab the paper. Realizing yanking the sheet off was pointless, the dark-haired guy ditched the plan, sparked a full-on brawl, and grabbed it for himself. The moment the young man swung, his buddies lunged in to stop him. One clapped a hand over his mouth and told him to calm down, while the girl rushed to apologize for their leader's stunt. Jake led the group with way too much swagger, refusing to back down to anyone. And while he sat there thinking he didn't need to apologize, Roa and Sonia cut him off, then sprinted straight into action and pushed to start the mission as soon as they could. The second they stepped into the 5th level D dungeon, enemies swarmed them instantly and kept launching attacks again and again. Roa's brand new range skill, the lightning of the Omover Rayer, blasted through the air and kept every enemy at bay. None of them ever got a shot. Every blow landed clean, and the duo bolted all the way to the 6th level. Then they realized the dungeon wasn't empty at all because the same guild group they'd met before was lurking nearby, watching their every move. Jake refused to fold that quickly. He'd bide his time and strike the second one of them messed up. Meanwhile, the blonde kid wasn't thrilled that their leader was hauling them into a wild chase for strangers. That dark-haired guy kept pushing, telling them to watch closely, then wait for Ro to slip up and lose. But the girl on the team wasn't convinced at all. The girl watched that couple handle every disaster like it was nothing. And yeah, the rumors were right on the money, because Roa really wiped out everyone with one single blow. The girl also clocked it, only top tier. Rank C adventurers ever dared to use the kind of magic that young man was throwing around. After she finished sizing him up, the girl realized he was a way better magician than she'd ever be. And that's when her heart latched onto him instantly. Meanwhile, Jake was already sick of hearing all those sweet, dramatic praises. The group's leader didn't care what that random guy could do because his crew was #1 in Lombard and these newcomers weren't even worth comparing. Jake scanned his two partners and snapped that they were way better than that couple. So much better, it was embarrassing. The girl burst out laughing in pure confusion, and the blonde young man blinked like he couldn't believe it, because their leader felt seriously off today. After they wiped out the 5th level, Sonia and Roa dropped to the 6th, and a creepy, endless dark corridor swallowed them whole. The moment the young man spotted it, he jabbed a finger to point it out, and Sonia immediately clocked the fact he'd already hit the 150th level. Sonia was sure Roa could crank her level up on the spot, so she decided to put that power to real use only for the guy to grin and say he had the exact plan. Right after he opened the list of skills and items he could buy, Roa dove into the hunt and then it hit him. He needed 3 things and he needed them fast. First came the brand new purple flash skill Sky High and Brutal. It cost a whopping 150 levels, hit with a base attack of 12,000 fired off in just 2 seconds. Then kept you stuck in a 20-second rollback punishment. Next up was the Mithril Sword. This beast slapped on 400 attack power, but it also demanded a whopping 150 levels from you. The third power was pure physical enhancement, turbocharging his attacks, but man, it came with a brutal price tag. It cost up to 200 levels. He decided the smart move was to grab a Mithril Sword first because boosting his attack mattered. After all, the purple flash skill demanded a whopping 500 base attack units. After grinding through 150 levels, Roa finally started forging his own sword, one that would crank his strength up several times over. Sonia couldn't tear her eyes away, gushing that watching the sword take shape was pure fascination. But the young man was still stuck at the 2nd level, and somehow she couldn't wrap her head around how calmly he just kept going. Roa told Sonia he needed real experience to level up again. So they split their little squad, and now all that was left was hunting monsters and smashing them for more points. As Roa closed in on the monster's lair, he snapped, "I'm ready to fight, so don't waste a second, we move now." The moment they stepped inside, colossal monsters burst into view, towering over the couple with terrifying snarls like they were seconds away from tearing them apart. As they spun around, a whole crowd of monsters surged into view, dinosaur after dinosaur, towering insects, and an endless swarm that never seemed to stop. Sonia's fear hit so hard she couldn't even speak. She just swallowed the saliva building in her mouth while the guy looked on, stunned by the horrifying sight they were staring down. The girl urged the guy to blast them away with one massive shot. Roa already knew this too. Spending strength on skills takes time, and if you blink at the right moment, you might never get another chance to strike. Sonia swore that if things turned too dangerous, she'd step in front of her partner and shield him with everything she could handle, while he shot back that if it got too risky, she'd have to bolt the second he gave the word. The kid yanked every eye toward himself, roaring for the monsters to lock on and come his way. Then the monsters didn't waste a second, rushing straight at him to deal with him. The group across the way watched the couple like it was a show. Then it finally clicked. Something felt off, and Jake saw the guy doing it on purpose, like he was baiting them to look his way. The group's leader knew this was a death trap and still couldn't shake the fear that Roa couldn't survive all those monsters by herself. Sonia trusted her partner with her whole heart, but worry gnawed at her because he was only on the 2nd level, meaning he was way more exposed than ever. Roa stayed icy calm, locked in on a deadly skill meant to erase his enemies, because even the tiniest hesitation meant one thing for the guy: his life. Sonia stared at it all from the outside and realized she couldn't save her partner at all. He had just 3 seconds left to pull off the attack. Even the people watching him didn't look smug. They looked scared, like they already knew how badly Roa could get hurt in a duel this dangerous. With 1 second left, the monsters were already breathing down their necks. Defeat felt unavoidable. Right then, the guy snapped his eyes open and locked onto the oncoming monsters, but it all happened at the perfect moment, because the young man slammed off a skill that had already saved him and carried him to victory more than once. The thunderbolt blasted out with insane force, drowning the entire monster horde in the lair in raw discharge so hard and fast that nobody had a shred of resistance. Monsters fell one after another, and Sonia's face lit up with pure joy because she never once doubted that her partner's plan would work. Even Jake couldn't believe his eyes. Everything he'd heard in the guild were rumors until now. Seeing that Roa was totally safe and sound, Jake just couldn't wrap his head around where that man pulled his strength from. What he did was nearly impossible. Roa stared at his hands just minutes ago. They unleashed magic so brutal it wiped out a mountain of monsters, and now his whole body was trembling with victory-fueled power. He clenched his fists, stood taller, and shut his eyes with pure joy and couldn't hide that grin, and his level shot up fast, smashing the 140 mark again. But time kept rolling and the level kept climbing. Roa even started betting with himself on where it would finally quit. Once he crossed 169, he was sure the growth was about to stop for good. Once Roa hit the 171st level, the EXP grind finally hit a hard stop. Then Roa burst with pure pride and joy. Sonia was thrilled for her partner. He managed to stack up to 168 levels in one shot, wiping out a whole wave of monsters with a single blow, and Sonya couldn't help but stare in awe at the guy. Rua's partner jabbed a finger behind her and told him exactly how many monsters he'd just crushed with his own hands, so now they were about to rake in a mountain of materials. Roa saw the sheer scale of what they'd done and realized there wouldn't be time to inspect that mountain of monsters. So he pushed the plan, grab only rare materials, and bolt back home. Sonya nodded right away because they truly had plenty of rare stuff to pick from. While the couple scavenged for resources, the crew trailing behind them stumbled over the words because what they'd just witnessed left them speechless. The white-haired kid stared in pure disbelief at the guy on the second level. How was he wiping out monsters so effortlessly that the whole layer crumbled in no time? It felt like there wasn't a single soul in all of Lamberg who could even come close to Roa. The guy snapped his head to his group's leader and told him they couldn't possibly keep up with this pair. Plus, the young man could see Jake was furious, and still he had to say the obvious. The leader clenched his teeth and snapped that he'd never admit some random guy was better than him. Jake refused to swallow his pride so hard that he even planned to challenge the couple to a duel, and the young white-haired man couldn't believe a word of it. The guy snapped at Jake to ditch this dumb plan because their power is way too dangerous. But the group's leader wouldn't back down. They'd cleared monsters by the dozens, and he swore they knew the dungeon better than Sonya and Roa. After Jake's band wins, they'll be back on top again. At least that's what the group's leader is bragging. Convinced his plan is brilliant and he's even smarter. But the blonde kid can't take it anymore and snaps that Jake's idea is straight up terrible. After Jake pushed him to repeat what his partner said, the blonde young man's confidence wobbled, but he still snapped back that the leader had no idea what he was talking about. After mulling it over, the young man still figured Jake was basically impossible to sway, so he didn't see the need to drag things out there. The blonde-haired man told Jake to set the duel rules himself, so they wouldn't cause a scene and wreck their name with the guild, and Jake nodded along, then asked to hear her thoughts. Doree, the partner, totally ignored the guy's conversation. She was too busy staring at Roa because she liked him a lot. Spying the same way as Doree, the guys saw that he and Sonya had already grabbed every last piece they needed, and were seconds from exiting the dungeon, so they went back to pick up the materials Sonya and Roa left behind. Back at the guild, the whole crowd was stunned somehow. A monster lair got wiped clean by just a couple of people. And right after that, everyone learned Sonya and Roa were hunting for someone to join their crew. Sonya spun around and told her partner she felt everyone's eyes drilling into her, but the guy stayed stone calm and said, "They're just trading rumors about us." He didn't want his partner freaking out over something like this, so he quickly shifted the conversation and pulled her attention somewhere else. Sonya stared at the guy, and there it was, a whole bag of money cradled in his hands. They'd been paid $120,000 for the magic stones and materials, plus another $150,000 for finishing the job. And just like that, they were already sitting on over $800,000 long. Sonya was relieved they didn't have to scrape together money, and Roa felt a little strange too, but honestly, he'd been broke for so long that this weird calm felt unfamiliar still. That didn't stop the young man from panicking inside because he had no clue what to do with a sum like that. After thinking it through, the guy finally locked onto a plan for the piled-up money, because deep down he'd been chasing one thing he'd always wanted to try. Turns out, this guy didn't just want dinner. He was hunting for the biggest meat feast he could spend his money on. The girl grinned, stunned at how mouthwatering that meat in front of her looked, and Sonya admitted she hadn't tasted anything like it in ages. Then she rolled a thought around and just stared ahead in silence, saying nothing. Seeing her partner's face, Sonya snapped, "What's going on?" She fully expected Roa to crumble into happy tears like always, but the young man only smirked and said he wouldn't cry, so Sonya shouldn't be laughing. Roa said that meat won't make him cry anymore because he isn't the same guy he was before. He's sure he can beat himself, and when Sonya saw him pick up his fork and knife, she finally asked the question that's been burning in her mind. She flushed with a shy little blush, then looked at her partner and asked, "Can you really hold the cutlery properly?" Roa snapped into embarrassment and sprinted back to the wall, crushed that he never even got the chance to touch cutlery because all his life he'd been chewing grass and beetles with his own hands. And the girl's question made the whole moment feel painfully awkward. Sonya told the guy everything was totally fine because she didn't want to make him look stupid. And then she turned to Roa like, "Watch this," and told him to just repeat after her. With a steady hand, she sliced the meat, pinned it with her fork, then slid it right to the young man's lips. "Eat." The moment he saw the steak waiting for him, tears blurred his vision, but he still snatched the fork and dug in, taking the bite she cut just for him. Unable to hold himself back, Roa started crying again because the meat in his mouth tasted so unbelievably good. And Sonya admitted she finally recognized the young man he used to be. Roa still wouldn't repeat after his partner, so he just skewered a chunk of meat with his knife and chewed it however he pleased, while Sonya shook her head and told the kid he was hilarious when he acted like that. Jake stormed up to the couple, hijacked the perfect moment, and grilled the young man. "So, did you and your partner really beat everyone in the D-rank dungeon?" Roa spotted that annoying guy and shot up from his seat, shouting, "What do you want from us?" and Jake just grinned back, saying he wanted to prove who the best adventurer in the city really was. The dark-haired guy jabbed a finger at Roa and declared a duel. He challenged Roa and his partner, and he'd see them in 3 days. Sonia blinked in shock, not even sure what to say. And the young man couldn't wrap his head around what Jake was trying to pull by offering something like that. The young man flat out refused the whole proposal. And just as the tension hit, a girl from Jake's group cut in mid-conversation. She snapped that their leader had no way of putting things right, then declared she'd explain everything herself. Dora grabbed Ro's hand and pleaded with him to understand that they weren't looking to start trouble with him or his partner. The girl said this duel isn't some scary feud. It's a friendly race where you beat the dungeon boss as fast as you can, and they even throw rewards at you for winning. Duri added that if Roa and Sonia pull off the win, they'll jump from rank D to rank C because their whole group already locked in that prize with the guild. The girl promised they'd all have a blast, while Jake peppered his partner with one question: why Doria wasn't in her usual costume, and the blonde guy chimed in too, saying their partner never smiled at them. Sonia's mood soured as Dory kept his eyes on Roa, so she snapped that they should take the rival's challenge. Yet the young man shot back that whatever duel comes next, they're still going to crush the dungeon boss. So Rola shrugged off the worry, clenched his fist, leaned in, and with zero hesitation declared that they'd take the challenge. While they were inside the dungeon, Sonia and Roa started gearing up because Roa couldn't forget Eric's warning. The dungeon boss is ranked C, so he and Sonia had to go all in, using every skill they had to survive the fight. After they crushed the next monsters, the duo pushed their joint level up by 20 more. Sony's steel wall and homing tricks even unlocked brand new skills once they hit the required level. And that was their shared mission. The little teen inched forward, and with every step, their stats sharpened until Sony and Roa finally hit level 200, pushing their skills higher and higher. With that power finally maxed out, Roa felt his health stack like a safety net, and Sonia clocked it instantly because her index was twice that high. Now Roa and Sonia were totally confident, no doubts at all, that they'd crush the dungeon boss and walk away with a win for their bet against another crew of adventurers. On the appointed day, Jake showed up looking dead sure of himself, and he hyped the guys hard, swearing that today was the final day in Lombard. The guild girl blurted out that the moment had finally arrived. This fresh batch of newcomers, thick with rumors and swaggering with pride, including Jake and his crew of self-appointed leaders from Lamberg, were about to tear into the same fight against each other. The bespectacled girl was the guild's rep and the future judge of this competition. So when Roa saw how wildly famous their duel had blown up, she nearly choked. Meanwhile, Jake had no clue what the guild had turned it into. To win, the teams had to beat the dungeon boss and then rush to the guild. Using the transfer stone every second would be judged by a magic timer. Once the teams haul that magic stone back as proof the dungeon boss is done for, the evaluator snatches it up and inspects it hard to make sure nobody cheated. The presenter turned it into a question who'd go first, and Jake shot back instantly that he and his group were taking the first round. The team leader told them, "We'll be back in a second, don't bolt, Roa." But the young man wasn't about to listen and run off. Dory rolled up to Roa and blurted out what he needed to say because before he even stepped into that duel with the boss, he had to get it off his chest. The girl's cheeks flushed as she flashed a soft smile, telling him she couldn't wait to team up with the young man and work together. Doreen admitted her leader's words were brutal, but she refused to share that ugly mindset toward Roa at all, so when Jake heard what she said, he grabbed her and shoved her straight into the dungeon. Hours crawled by, and after a full hour and a half, Jake's team still hadn't come back. Everyone waited with bated breath, but nobody had a clue when they'd finally return. Sonia was off in her own head on a totally different topic, then blurted out to Roa, "So, why do guys obsess over girls with big curves?" She didn't play it cool. She straight up asked the guy if he personally likes something like that, and he shrugged and said, "It all comes down to who you are and what you prefer." Roa grinned and admitted he'd always rather pick someone who looks like a dream because sparring with her is just more fun and way more interesting. The girl lit up at that, and Roa's partner's cheeks went a little pink. But before she could say a word, the moment moved on. As Rowan looked back, the crowd nearby erupted in shouts that Jake and his team were already back from the dungeon, and Jake strode past with a swaggering confidence right beside his crew until someone finally demanded how long they'd been trapped in there. The presenter said, "An hour and 32 minutes just went by, and since the usual dungeon run takes about 2.5 hours, that crew had barely any time to breathe before they kept up." Guild members surged toward Jake, congratulating him for the incredible results. Then the group leader cut it off cold and said there was nothing special about it at all. Jake Grind and his couple walked by, and Jake told them it would be brutally hard to beat the record he'd just set. So you sat there thinking it over, since an hour and a half felt like the real answer. Roa couldn't shake the tension either, because yesterday they'd needed a full hour just to reach the lower floor. The hard times didn't rattle the little crew. Sonia and Roa were certain they'd smash the dungeon boss before Jake's team even got close. As they pushed inside, a lizard fighter snapped into the path of the group, every one of them hitting the 150th level. Sonia ripped the monster's focus away, and Roa seized the moment to smash into them right after the guy yelled, "Duck!" and the girl immediately dropped low. The Thunderbolt skill tore the monster down, and Sonia kept saying they were holding it together and moving at a solid pace while Roa nodded along. pushing them to dodge the enemy as much as they could to save every second. The young man lit up after their duet, saying he and Sonia were finally starting to cope better and better. And Sonia herself confirmed it then. Roa's partner chimed in that they haven't even had much time together yet, which meant their victory was about to hit like a crushing wave. He was buzzing with excitement, but he knew they couldn't drop their guard yet because the real fight was coming, and the dungeon boss was still waiting. Sonia nodded with a grin at Roa because she totally got it, and she couldn't wait to prove to all those jealous eyes just how awesome they really were. While the couple toasted their perfect victory, another monster lurked nearby, but he held back and refused to attack them. When Sonia saw that monster right on top of them, she barked at Ro to snatch him immediately, and the lizard broke down in tears because not only did they have to fight him, but a girl had also ditched him the day before. After they finally dropped to the very last 6 floors, the couple spotted the entrance right where the dungeon boss would be waiting for them. Roa leaned in and asked the girl if she was ready to head with him, since their boss was almost certainly a C-rank beast. Then Sonia grinned and said, "Don't worry, kid, we're never going to lose." He was fired up, saying everything would work out for them for sure. So stop stalling and get them into battle, ASAP. As they stepped into the dungeon's boss room, a kelp monster surged into view before the couple, towering like a huge unicorn right on cue for a victory at level 400. And just like Eric promised, its rank felt safe enough. The moment he spotted the uninvited intruders, the monster charged straight at them because taking them down was easy. Sonia snapped a shield up in front of her and slammed down her skill steel wall, and the monster, thrown off by her, desperately tried to smash through the protection she'd just built. Next, Sonia unleashed her second skill homing and funneled every ounce of the monster's power straight into her shield, but when it slammed into her armor, it couldn't break her at all. Oa's partner held the line, standing unshaken to shield the guy from everyone else's attacks. Even with a recommended level that high, he couldn't help but praise the girl because deep down, he knew Sonia could hit back and land nearly double the damage. He chose a spell that fires in just 2 seconds with a tiny radius, but Ro was convinced that'd be more than enough. With his sword clutched in a death grip, the young man slammed one of his skills into motion and hurled his spell straight at the monster, and as it realized the strike was coming, there was no time to react, so the blow landed clean, right on target. Roa had just unlocked that purple flash skill, and it looked way too lethal to ignore, so he slammed it into the dungeon boss, and the monster dropped after taking that brutal hit, sealing a clean win for the pair. Once the monster crumpled, Ro's stats surged back into motion, his level shot up to 270, and he earned the title Conqueror of the Landberg Dungeon. Because he earned a special rank, the power he needs to use his skills shot up by 300 units. Roa didn't see it coming, but honestly, he loved the surprise bonus. Sonia lit up at the fact that they crushed those C-ranked kelpies so cleanly. Roa clocked the purple flash's damage at around 12,000, then watched it spike to 24,000 when the attribute hit just right. Because this new skill wasn't just strong, it was brutally devastating. He also made it clear, don't you dare forget to grab the magic stone. Then you'll step out through the barrier and use the transfer stone to get back outside. Sonia's cheeks flared red, and she couldn't help but wonder if they could actually win because something about it just didn't make sense. The girl spun around and shouted at the guy, yanking his focus away from the materials, then pointed toward the exit and said something weird was going on. And when Rosa's partner looked, the barrier was still there, even though it was supposed to be gone. Roa also spotted the barrier was already up, but he couldn't wrap his head around why it wouldn't budge, especially after they'd just wiped out the dungeon boss. Then Sonia glanced up a few seconds later and finally spotted what was blocking the barrier from opening. Rua tilted his head and spotted something that made his partner flinch, another boss hanging from the ceiling. Turns out the dungeon had another monster waiting in the shadows, but the ghost of Pirate William Kidd wasn't just tough, he was on a whole different level. And the 1000th floor was the one they recommended for the win, with the boss ranked B. Roa couldn't even blink, he'd never seen monsters this terrifying before, and Sonia was just as stunned because the level they needed was way higher than the one she'd fought for together with her partner. There was zero time to even process it. Williams's Pirate Kid's ghost was already sprinting into attacks on anyone who stood in his way. Roa's mind went blank as the monster bore straight down on him. There wasn't even a second to think, let alone fire off any skills. Sonia rushed in to help her partner, then fired off her homing skill to pull the opponent off balance and buy them a moment. The monster didn't even flinch at the girl, like she vanished from its sight, while the ghost of Pirate William Kidd kept its focus locked solely on the young man. Sonia snapped at her partner that her skill had fully died on her, and she couldn't wrap her head around how Roa was supposed to help. He knew the monster was hunting him on purpose, but he couldn't make sense of this. Why would William, the pirate's ghost, slash at him with a sword just to try to hurt the kid? Roa planted himself in a defensive stance, swung his sword to block every strike and refuse a single hit, while Sonia screamed in panic, totally at a loss for what to do. Outside, the presenter glanced at the clock and announced that 45 minutes had already crushed by since Sonia and Roa slipped into the dungeon, and the glasses girl kept watching, waiting for any sign they'd be forced to turn back soon. But nothing showed up yet. Jake gloated, claiming they might have been trapped right from the start, while Dory snapped, furious that the couple would be wiped out with a massive win. The group's leader snapped, demanding his partner pick a side, and when she said she was rooting for the cool side, Jake swore they were the cool ones while the presenter begged them to stop the fight. While everyone was sitting around waiting for Sonia and Roa to come back, the glasses-wearing girl leaned in and begged to tell her scary dungeon stories. Anything to make the wait for those two feel less awful. The presenter revealed that it isn't just the dungeon bosses. Extra bosses can lurk in there too, waiting to ambush you. But when the right conditions hit, a special monster crawls out with power that goes past the limit. So if it targets you, you should already brace for death. And Jake, hearing that tale, shook like crazy, terrified out of his mind. The presenter straight up promised there weren't any extra dungeon bosses popping up yet, so Jake didn't have to freak out though. Jake was already terrified and begged him to stop hitting him with scares like that. Down in the dungeon, the young man fought for his life against William Kidd's ghost, and they must have triggered some weird special conditions because that's when an extra boss suddenly crashed the party. The monster refused to back off, swinging in with harder and harder blows at the guy who was desperately trying to block the sword. For a young man who normally never throws down in close quarters, especially with swords, he still struck with pure skill and magic and somehow pulled off the win. That extra boss came at him with pure seriousness, and Roa's strength started to crumble fast like the fight was slipping out of his hands. Roa clocked that his opponent was B rank, and he knew one single hit from that monster would crush him with pain he couldn't even tolerate. The kid tried blasting in the stone they handed him, but it just refused to budge, so the only way out was to throw down and fight. Roa also knew the brutal truth: his level was only 270. Way below the recommended number needed to beat the ghost of Pirate William Kim. Sonia blared advice at Roa: stay back, keep your distance, and don't let that monster crowd the young man. Once he stretches the distance, he can finally unleash his best skill, the one that smashed every monster that came before. The young man took his partner's advice, spun around, and sprinted the other way. Anything to put as much distance as he could between himself and that extra boss. Roa bolted away and slammed into Pirate William Kidd's ghost with the lightning thunderer, but the extra boss snapped out of the way so cleanly that the lightning never even landed a single strike. Sonia watched it all unfold and realized Roa must have missed, because she couldn't wrap her head around why the young man couldn't land a clean attack. Roa froze in shock because this just couldn't be real. When he unleashed that skill, lightning moved at terrifying speed and missing it should have been impossible. Right then, Pirate William's ghost shot out and lunged at Roa, punching him straight in the stomach. The young man never saw it coming, so he didn't even get a chance to react. He shot across the room, slammed into the wall, and let out a brutal scream. When Sonia saw what happened, she burst into a scream too because she couldn't do a thing to save her partner, and danger was snapping back at him. The new monster wouldn't let up. It charged at the guy again, ready to strike. The exhausted young man was still reeling when the girl threw herself forward again, slamming her shield up just as the ghost of Pirate William crashed into it. Then Sonia realized he'd switched targets and was now aiming right at her. Dashing away from the extra boss, the girl screamed to her partner that she'd buy him time so he could focus on his recovery. Roa was totally lost on what his partner meant because he didn't have a single wound healing skill in him. Rowan could feel his life slipping away. One more hit and that would be it. No second chance. Roa searched for the right thing. Sure, he'd face a hard situation someday, but he never imagined it would hit this brutally difficult. As Sonia fought off yet another boss, the young man couldn't help thinking this wasn't just a random trial. It was a gatekeeping test, and if you fail, you'll never master all the magic. Clutching Eric's words in her mind, Roa realized most adventurers vanish once they hit rank D. Yet this guy was definitely not the type to stop just because he'd reached it. The young man tuned in again, grit hardening in his chest. There was no way he was walking away like that. One bad break didn't mean the whole fight was over. Roa figured there were only two things that could be stopped his skill from landing. Either the target was too far, or that kid had charged in like a maniac. Even if Roa jumps in from the monster's blind spot to hit a second boss, the creature snaps right into a counterattack, and that can't happen because he's got only one strike left, and if that fails, he dies. Gripping an even stronger sword, he realized waiting was out of the question, so he braced himself to parry every blow because once he chose the blade, Roa knew it meant one thing: fighting up close. Lucky for Roa, he already knew he had magic tailor-made for a moment like this, though the power to drink then ink is something he hasn't learned yet, even if he's been eyeing it on the list for ages. Roa drank a potion from his item box, poured the strength back into his body, and pushed himself up just enough to unleash his skills. After downing the potion, the young man pushed through a brutal grind of 200 levels to unlock his brand new power raw unstoppable body strength energy. He carved a seal into the floor, then slammed his sword down to spark the power, pushing its boost to a mind-blowing 3 times the size. Once he unleashed the ability, his attack and defense shot up threefold, and suddenly, everyone had real hope he could actually take the fight. Magic guzzled 10 power every second Roa spent strengthening his skill, so when the gain stayed the same, the cost shot up to triple, and that left him just 34 brutal seconds to get his attack off. He forced himself to calm down and focus, because he wasn't doing this solo. His partner was right there, backing him up every step of the way. Once the young man slips out of the ability's grip, He knows Sonya will step in and nurse him back to full recovery. Roa burst out of his tiny hiding spot and told Sonya to cover him because he was about to strike up close, and he meant it. Sonya just couldn't figure out why he went for hand-to-hand instead of blasting her from a distance. Roa sprinted straight at Pirate William Kidd's ghost and shouted that the second round was starting now. Level 70 against the thousands. Sonya stood behind two figures as they geared up to clash, and that extra boss loomed up near the ceiling, just waiting for the instant to strike. Roa stood battle-ready, gripping his sword with both hands and refusing to look away at the man he'd fight for the second time. Then the ghost of Pirate William Kidd stared back and lifted his own blade, lining it up straight at him. A second later, metal shrieked, and the blade slammed into a brutal duel, and the extra boss didn't hold back. Rohit snapped into defense and drove the attacks back. When the monster slammed in again, Roa snapped out of rash instincts, parried the next lunge, then landed a clean counter straight from someone else's blade. The duel raged on with zero backing down, and the ghost of Pirate William Kidd never slowed. He just kept slamming into the guy like it was endless. Brewer knew swinging at this kind of opponent wasn't going to be easy, but the second round flipped everything because the monster couldn't slam the young man into the wall anymore. Roa sized up the enemy's timing, thinking, "This is it." He swung now, since their defense drained their power without even landing a hit. With the perfect timing, Roa blocked the blow coming for him, then surged forward and swung his sword to hit back before his enemy could recover. Because he read every signal perfectly, his strike landed dead on and the enemy took the full hit right in the damage. Captain William Kidd's ghost took a brutal wound, but it screamed that the one who wouldn't drop from a single sword strike wasn't him. Roa knew that hit landed like a weak punch, but the fact that he even managed that in a fight stacked against him felt like a huge win. This kid was dead serious because right now the fight wasn't just a battle, it was life or death. Yet he couldn't shake the strange truth he actually craved that adrenaline rush, like it was lighting him up from the inside. After a quick wobble, the extra boss snapped back and launched at the guy again. Rage-fueled, though every hit landed true, none of it ever connected because Roa calmly parried every blade coming his way. Even he couldn't deny it, facing someone that strong felt weirdly thrilling. But he knew his power to use the ability was burning out, so he slammed into the moment and had to end this fight. Because Roa wasn't watching closely enough, his opponent slipped out of sight and then popped up right behind him. Roganov didn't see this coming, and confusion hit him hard. Then his memory snapped back. Any delay meant instant death. Feeling the ghost of Pirate William Kidd creep up behind him, he figured he'd have no time to block the strike, but his loyal assistant rushed in and threw up a shield, taking the hit herself to protect the young man. Then Sonya unleashed her homing skill again, steering everything just enough to dodge disaster. She wore a calm mask, unshaken by a brutal opponent because all she cared about was guarding her partner, the only one who could bring down that monster. Sonya clutched her shield tight, bracing herself for the hit, and even after the strike landed, she didn't buckle for a second because that was the only way she could fight her part in Roa's joint victory. She lit up because her skill finally paid off, and then she figured it out. Homing only bites at close range, which is why last time she couldn't pull it off right away. Sonya told her partner she probably couldn't keep those brutal attacks at bay for long, so the young man needed medical help ASAP while this opening was still here. Roa thanked her partner for jumping in, but the young man realized she wasn't just holding out, she was drained, barely standing, and each hit from that monster kept battering her until she could barely breathe. He knew stalling was pointless, so he chugged 3 recovery potions back-to-back, trying to heal in one brutal shot. With his strength index finally back to full power for skills and abilities, Roa felt the attack plan clicking into place clearer with every second. After watching Pirate William Kidd's ghost get totally rattled by Sonya, Roa lunged in from behind, but that extra boss snapped around on a dime the moment he sensed danger coming. This wasn't the whole play, one strike was just the spark, pushing him to launch the next attack right away. The moment Roa found the monster's weak spot, she exploded forward and slammed into the hand gripping the sword. With one arm gone, the extra boss still lunged to grab his weapon. With the other, he refused to waste a second until Sonya cut in and snatched him clean off his footing, freezing him in place without even lifting her shield. The girl shrieked at her partner to cast the spell right now, even as she pinned the opponent in her grip. Kidd's pirate ghost wasn't put down for ages. Once he felt an invisible grip dragging him from behind, he stopped hesitating and went straight on the attack. After tossing the girl aside, the boss snapped out of the young man's grip and locked back in, refusing to stop the fight. That's exactly what he needed. He finally had the time to line up one of his skills and unleash it. Roa apologized to Sonya for the delay and mumbled that it only takes 2 seconds to activate. Then, boom! The moment it hit, he unleashed a jaw-dropping attack that slammed into the added boss like a monster of pure power. Roa unleashed his thunderbolt, and this time the monster couldn't dodge it at all. The hit landed clean. As the extra boss crumbled piece by piece, Sonya finally let out a huge breath because the fight was over, and she couldn't be happier. Roa looked happy, but his eyes burned with steady confidence and real power. Then the young man leaned in and fired one question at the mighty monster. What did it feel like to get beaten by someone stuck at the 71st level, ranked D? Sonia wipes away tears and blurts that she's so relieved everything turned out fine with that guy because at some point, she didn't even have the faintest idea what would come next. Honestly, Roa never thought they'd pull off beating a rank monster. This magic creation skill felt downright impossible, like pure absurdity. He even credits Sonia's reckless streak for saving his life, but there's a catch. The level keeps climbing no matter what, and wave after wave of signs starts to swarm around them, screaming that it's rising higher and higher. Sonia reveals that before all this, Mr. Roa was only at level 70, and she's convinced that crushing those strong enemies will blow that number up again and again. The guy can't wait to see just how far it'll skyrocket. This time, their magic was blazing, but their swordplay was even more insane. Sonia blurts out where that guy learned it, and Roa explains that he nailed the basics right at the start of his adventure. Sonia stared in disbelief. If Roa keeps hammering at this, he's on track to become a full-blown swordmaster. He refused because he knew if he chased everything at once, he'd never truly master a single thing. And while they were still talking, new tables kept popping up around them, each one cranking higher and higher. Rolla could care less about swinging a sword. He's all in on blasting magic, so he keeps leveling up his spells, chasing bigger power, and aiming to reach brand new heights in magic. The guy slumped and braced his hand on the floor, utterly wiped out. Sonia told him to lie down for a bit since they still had time. He refused, saying the floor was too hard, and for him, getting a real place to sleep is everything, because his health and his mood for the whole next day depend on it. Then Sonia scoops Roa's head onto her hips and tells him he's got exactly 5 minutes to rest his head on her lap. That guy frets that he might be too heavy for the job. Then the girl shuts him down, saying it's nothing complicated at all. So Roa Foyle, a 19-year-old, boosts his level to 470 and walks straight into his new title. Captain of the Ghost Pirate, William Kidd. The woman bursts in with the news. The magic timer's stopped dead and she's trying to play it cool while those two guys come barging back, and every adventurer can't stop asking how long was that whole nightmare. Roa and Sonia burst in front of everyone. Already done in just 1 hour and 29 minutes, 3 minutes faster than Jake's crew. And the second Jake saw the time, indignation flared up instantly because in his mind, there's no way not when his team knows this dungeon's layout way better than Roa and Sonia. After letting out his frustration, Jake snapped at Roa. So, you really beat the dungeon boss, i.e. the Night Geats, and demanded they show the magic stone right now as proof. Roa just shrugged it off, saying the guy didn't need to prove anything. He lifts 2 blazing stones in his palm, glowing bright as fire, and right then Roa calls in a specialist to judge them. Jake's eyes widened. There were 2 stones. Roa handed them both to the master so he could examine them, and the man said one was way bigger than even a Class C magic stone. The man stared hard at one of the stones, and Jake snapped to the conclusion that it had to be fake until the man shot that idea down cold, insisting the stones are real and freshly collected. A man grips a stone in his hand, and the crowd swarms around it like it's priceless, and he bluntly says it's from Class B, then the entire crowd jolts with shock. Jake shot a sideways look at Roa and demanded, "What does that even mean?" Because there was no way monsters belonged in a dungeon like this, not at this rank, and Jake couldn't wrap his head around what these guys had really done. He started spilling the truth. It turned out to be one more boss when the pirate ghost of William Kidd came for them. He and Sonia shut him down and grabbed the reward they earned. Hearing those words, the guys instantly started whispering and debating among themselves because none of them had ever heard of some extra boss before. Then the woman snapped into motion and barreled straight toward Roa because deep down she figures the guy's just messing around after all. She'd only told everyone that a new boss shows up when a whole set of strict conditions are satisfied. Sonia asked, "What conditions do we need?" Even if the job is basically impossible, knowing the requirements could still decide whether we pull it off. She tells them the group needs 2 or fewer people, and then boom, the sprint down to the lowest floor has to happen in under an hour and under 30 seconds to drop the dungeon boss. But there's one more rule: you can't land 3 attacks on the dungeon boss less than that. And nope, that's not the last condition. The woman explains a bonus boss shows up only for players who pull off every single one of them. Each rule alone feels manageable, but stacking them all into one fight against one opponent is a whole different kind of grind. Sonia grins and says, "Mr. Roa did exactly that." Then the guy even asked her not to relist all his merits, and the crowd goes silent with shock when they realize Roa and Sonia wiped out the dungeon boss and the extra one in just an hour and a half. It was straight up mind-blowing. These adventurers nailed every single condition so effortlessly that the girl went rocketing into the guy's arms, but Sonia snapped in and shoved Roa aside at once. And the real problem, keeping Roa safe from all those crazed fans while still hiding her feelings like a locked vault, is crazy. Hard for Sonia. The guy on the sidelines finally snapped and admitted it was a total loss. And Roa knows Jake's furious, but he insists Jake needs to see the truth and accept it. Bitter tears spilled from Jake's eyes, and he didn't even have to say it. You could tell it was brutal still. He hauled a breath of relief because the guys were all okay, then snapped into a furious rant about how he's crying like a man. Jake finally swallowed his anger, strode up to the guys, and admitted he'd been wrong. He was sorry he ever underestimated them, and even more ashamed that he mocked them just because they were new. Roa told him not to sweat it, and he kept thinking how Jake didn't look anything like Carter because that other guy was so stubborn it was unreal. The guys clapped hands in a quick shake, and Rua grinned, saying he'd had a blast today. Sonia and Roa shoved into the crowd, and people on the side kept firing. Questions were the guys recruiting new members, while others demanded a full rundown of today's fight, the one with the extra boss. Suddenly, Jake snapped to his feet and shouted for everyone to clear out at once, telling them the guys were drinking with the crew today. Then the girl grabbed Ro's hand and begged the guy to come with them, while Roha could only pray he'd make it home tonight and finally get some sleep. So, yeah, the guys finally called it a night and crashed. Roa insisted it was still worth getting together like this now and then, and at the table they ate, drank, and laughed, while everyone traded story after story from their travels. It was way past midnight when someone tried to sneak into Roa's room, but the intruder froze because the guy had been locked in a sweet dream for ages, finally getting the chance to drop his guard and rest after that brutal test. Turns out it was Sonia. She eased the door open, slipped into the room, and covered the guy with a blanket, only to catch him passed out again with the door still unlocked because he'd been drinking like it was a dream. The girl pressed her palm to the guy's forehead, grinning because he was knocked out cold. Roa, he must have been exhausted. So I slid into the chair beside the bed, and she blurted out that today she'd been terrified because she worried Roa might not be able to handle it. She was relieved he was okay. Then she leaned in toward his head. At first she noticed something looked off, but she still needed to get this one thing off her chest at least while Roa was asleep. Sonia drops the truth she's head over heels for Roa, and the moment she meets him, pure joy explodes in her chest. That one encounter flips her whole life upside down. He finally stopped to catch his breath, and Roa was over the moon because they'd gotten to this moment. At last, he couldn't stop smiling, relieved that everything came out exactly like Jake and the others promised. And Sonia and the crew totally pushed their adventurer rank up to C, while Roa's guild card flashes as the cool goal. He's grinning because he can finally track how far he's come, but Sonia bursts into laughter when she realizes his endless long naps are trashing his rank's reputation. Roa said he'd slept right until noon, and Sonia didn't even try to wake him up. She told him she'd seen enough of his sleeping face and the sex part too. Then she stopped, blinked, and admitted she was worn out herself. Sonia leans in, curious as heck, asking what they'll do today now that the city dungeon is already cleared, while Roa digs in, tells me he's got a title, and says that in this place he's finished everything he came for. Then he leans in and tells her, "Buy a land dragon, do that, and we'll unlock the next dungeon." The heroine presses the young man again, pushing for his answer right there once more. But Roa swears he once spotted an adventurer tearing across the world on a land dragon plated in foil because everyone claims it's a whole lot faster than a horse. Roa practically beamed, sitting on nearly 1,000,000 saved like, maybe he could finally buy a dragon now until Sonia cut in and told him one brutal thing. Turns out snagging the land dragon costs roughly 10 million euros. Roa mulled it over one more time, then snapped to a decision he and Sonia weren't done yet, and Sonia watched in shock as he slipped back into his old appearance. From the side, a voice suddenly cuts in, yelling, "Don't quit that fast!" And the newcomer swings in with offers so good they make every adventurer's eyes light up. Turns out Eric storms up to them, he lifts a hand, waves at the guys, and flashes a grin. He claims there are wild rumors flying about Sonia and Roa, and he swears he even heard the guys wiped out the extra boss. The guy pointed out that they were chatting about this news right in his store, while Roa clearly didn't remember that Eric even had one. After all, it had been ages since they last met, and anything could have changed by now. He confirmed it, then reminded the guys he'd quit adventuring and opened up a tool shop today. He showed up at the guild to handle every last formality, and Eric was buzzing with relief that he finally got to see everyone again. Eric just wanted to thank them for bailing him out, and he told them he'd be thrilled if Sonia and Roa could spare a free minute to swing by his store. The guys burst outside, and Rowan took one look around going, "This doesn't look like a store, it looks like a stable." Eric nodded, dead serious. "Yeah, it's a stable." And he swore he wasn't trying to brag, but his family built a ridiculously successful business here. Adventurers and travelers are practically begging for work, and right on top of that, Eric's family owns a whole herd of horses and land dragons. Eric rushed up to one of the stall doors, yanked it open, and a huge land drag roared right there. Then the guy grinned and said he'd hand it over to the guys for free. Roa and Sonia froze at the idea because who knows if Eric would really go that far. But you can't ignore it. Not everyone gives up an expensive pet so easily. Eric snapped that these guys couldn't be shy because their hesitation was wrecking his life, and he even said this land dragon was one of his absolute bests. Eric tenderly rubbed the dragon's cheek and it shut its eyes, savoring every second, while he's completely certain Roa will handle him. So yeah, at this point, he's ready to let go of the pet. Eric said that ever since he decided to become an adventurer, this dragon's never left his side. So if it rides with the guys now, then Eric's dream is finally going to explode into reality. Roa and Sonia couldn't believe what they were seeing right then. The dragon lunged a step toward the guys, dropped down, and started fawning over them like they were something precious, like a beast that huge could somehow melt into the gentlest kind of affection for a human. Roa's eyes lit up. This dragon wasn't hostile at all, so he grabbed a handful of grass and held it out like a peace offering. Sonia saw Roa already soaking up every second of it, while Eric was certain that the dragon and the guy would click instantly. Then Eric told him he could name the dragon however he wanted, and Roa suddenly remembered he'd heard Yao's voice before. Roa blurted out the dragon's name, Yao Yoruzu Inferno Justice Killer. But the moment he did, someone told him, in no uncertain terms, that it was a terrible choice. Sonia leaned in and asked Roa if she could give the dragon a prettier name. And Roa blinked, then decided caramel strawberry sauce with whipped chocolate fit him way better. Until Eric, staring at the picture, finally realized there was no name on Earth that matched a dragon like Yao. Roa nodded at Eric and welcomed his brand new dragon. Then Eric said, "Come by my store, my guys will hook you up with discounts on the tools you need." And now it's time to pack up and hit the road. The next morning, the guys were already packing to go, yet Jake's teammate girl, tears streaming down her face, couldn't accept that Ro was leaving so soon, begging Jask not to leave her behind. The girl предложила обменять Роа на Джейка, но Соня сразу вспыхнула. Она не хотела видеть его в команде. Роа попытался заявить, что может сам за себя постоять, но никто и пальцем не шевельнул, чтобы прислушаться к его словам. Roa couldn't wrap her head around how so many people had swarmed them, and Jake just shrugged like, of course, these guys are celebrities now, insisting he knows it all and they're not about to stand still. Jake snaps at Roa and Sonia and warns them that if his team spots them again, victory is going to be his. Then he tells the guys to stay sharp, stay healthy, and worry about getting sick as little as possible until that day. Eric rolled up to see the guys off, dropped a parting message to keep Yao's friendship strong, and Roa thanked him for everything, because Roa was already straddling the dragon, helping Sonia scramble up. Then Yao let out a sound that almost sounded like his own name, and Sonia and Roa froze, stunned. Next thing they knew, they were taking off on their way. Now the guys are already riding up on the land dragon's back and blasting off, and Roa's loving every second he's got the trip grin on his face again. Totally convinced Yao is the real deal for long hauls. The dragon started with one slow step, then ramped up step after step until it surged forward, and the guys spun around to watch the residents, adventurers, and Eric send them off on a blazing good journey. Sonia's mood drops, so she asks Roa if he feels it too, and he nods, saying meeting all these friends here has been amazing, but he's sure they'll run into even more in their next city. Roa told her, even right there in the foyer, he was thrilled he'd met Sonia. So thrilled, in fact, that she couldn't even believe what she'd just heard. That sentence hit her right in the soul, and before she could stop it, her cheeks flared bright red. The girl shot the guy a question. Did he hear anything last night? And when he just stared, she realized it all made sense. Roa slept like a rock and heard nothing at all. Right then, a cobalt fighter rolled in like the worst timing imaginable. Roa stares at the map and realizes another city isn't going to be far at all. Next, they tear toward the volcanic city of Almonds, where the streets feel like they're about to erupt. Two men crashed into the old man's house and shoved threats in his face, demanding he get out because they wanted to claim it as their own shelter, and that they never expected to stumble on a place like this deep in the forest. The man sobbed and begged those guys to go home because if they took this house, he'd never get out in time, but they wouldn't touch his misery, and snapped that if he wanted to live, he had to bolt right now. Right in the middle of the brawl, an outsider crashed in, and then two brave men stepped up, demanding the bandits stop taking the old man's house. Roa and Sonia shot them vicious glares, furious that the bandits had attacked a defenseless man. The bandits didn't like that one bit, and demanded to know who these guys were. Roa didn't shoot back with a brave answer. He grinned and said they'd hauled in a ton of crabs from the river and would roast them later for breakfast, and the bandits were stunned when the men just proudly showed off their catch. Sonia, just as stubborn, chimed in that she'd already whipped up a big pot of curry for Mr. Roa for dinner. The bandits blew up with rage, eyeing the guy and girl like a weird little crew, so they swarmed in to beat them up and rob them. Then bam! A bucket of crabs crashed to the ground, and Roa laughed that it's way more fun to earn everything with your own hard work. He cast a spell like it was nothing, fully expecting the villains to get their fun. Only the bandits froze because they didn't just see a fisherman. They finally realized they'd stumbled onto a real magician. The bandits caught on, and Roa slammed in thunderbolt lightning, zapping the guys out of the way, and with just a couple of punches, he kept the old man safe. On the road to Almond, Roa and Sonia tore through the forest and hauled an old man named Enrico to safety. And when he finally caught his breath, he told them he used to be an adventurer too, then dropped the kind of info that could change everything. All Moon City is powered by a booming mining industry, and its dungeons are packed with fire islands rank C and up, no doubt about it. so the guys are about to smash through wave after wave of brutal trouble. These dungeons are what's left of ancient mines ghosted by traps meant to stop anyone from stealing the minerals, and a lot of them are still sitting there waiting to snap. And down on the lowest level, a giant wolf crouches in roaring fire. People swear it's a volcanic hound of the ranks, and when she bares her terrifying face, flames explode from her mouth like a living nightmare. Outside, the sky is crystal clear, but Ro is sure of one thing: without water-based magic, they're doomed. They're also hunting for spells or gear that can handle traps because after what happened, they refuse to get caught in one again. Sonia tells him that after the extra boss fight, she unlocked a bunch of brand new skills, and he's all curiosity. What training did she get? Because if there's one thing he expects, it's skills that are built to help her crush in battle. At 17, a girl just unlocked a crazy loadout: steel wall homing, abnormal resistance, giant shield, protective spirit, and even a poison shield. And with skills like these, the crew's about to steamroll whatever comes next in their next adventure. Roa quickly clocked it. Sonia can unlock another skill, and if that girl pushes her power all the way to level 10, her poison shield turns into a nasty damage machine once you upgrade it. The guy stared at the idea of magic for ages, thinking it could finally tip the scales. Then he struck gold with the water blade, his perfect starting move, and with this new attack in his hands, he could finish the job way faster than ever. He paid 150 levels for a water blade, snatched it up, and dove straight into studying it. And now, thanks to Enrico's intel, the guys will be ready to go before they even set off. Then Roa couldn't shake the question: why would a man vanish so deep into the forest? Sonia fumed because he ignored the old man, even though she found his tale straight up touching and dangerously sensual. Sonia remembered how an old man once fell head over heels for a nymph he stumbled across in the forest. Enrico doesn't know when he'll see her again, but he keeps waiting, day after day. And the girl can't help thinking it's the most romantic story ever. He shot his gaze upward, and love's warmth swept through his thoughts then. Grinning, he told the girl that crushing the dungeon was way more fun. The girl already knew he'd say exactly that. Suddenly, Yao jolted up and snapped into a foul mood, so the guys broke their gaze. Turns out they'd already rolled up near the city of Almond, where you could spot rooftops and the whole place from the high road. The city buzzed with life. Folks strolled the warm, cozy streets while the guild stayed busy. The moment the guys rolled in, they quickly set the land dragon up at a stall so he could finally rest. Sonia and Roa head down the street when the guy suddenly freezes. Something feels off in this city, and he's sure it's the Burning Springs because that's exactly what makes Alkmond famous. Roa's kicking himself for chickening out and not grabbing 2 rooms because the resort is why every hotel price is insane. And this time, the guys had no choice but to cram into one room that costs a whopping $4,000. Sonia jumped in to help that guy and told him that saving money actually matters, but the guy couldn't stop staring, asking why Sonia looked so damn happy. And Roa's still clueless, completely unable to read what those feelings are really about. Roa told the girl to grab everything she could and head straight for the dungeon to knock out a few quick tasks because an adventurer who skips training and routine stuff pays for it later. Then came the real job. Bring back the skin of hellbores and you'd get a reward worth chasing. That guy can't wait a second to see what a real rank C dungeon looks like because Sonia and Roa just got the chance to dive into a brand new playground for adventure. The dungeon stretches wild with windows, floors, and staircases that link everything together, and each glass window spills out darkness so thick it feels endless. Roa yells at Sonia to sprint left right now. A massive infernal rank C loser is sprinting after the girl like he's hell-bent on catching her. Roa realizes the girl grabbed an awesome position and fires on real speed while Sonia moves with flawless precision in battle, shutting down every doubt about her skill. Roa lifts his blade over his head, ready to unleash a brand new skill he just learned. He yanks the sword's blade forward and snaps off the water blade technique because this move only works if your body is built tough and unbreakable. Water streams slash the infernal boar like blades, and the guys finally seize victory. Sonia's jaw drops. This brand new magic is brutally effective, and it proves that learning new skills helps kids grow faster. Roa fell into thought, and Sonia clocked it instantly. "What's wrong?" she pressed. Then the guy blurted that it was weird the girl's level hadn't jumped, like, doubtable. After all, the recommended level for taking them down is basically the same. Sonia said the guy could always level up. Roa just stared like he felt nothing at all, and the truth hit hard. He'd been battling monsters far higher than him his whole life. Sonia warned me that the monsters get way nastier on the lower floors and that every trap is a minefield. One wrong step and you're thrown off course, stuck, unable to even think about the next orders. Sonia jolts Enrico with his own warning. Those guys have zero clue what danger is stalking them next, so everyone has to stay razor alert. Eyes wide, or they'll step right into a trap, or worse, run into something far more vicious than they can handle. The moment the girl said it, she stomped onto the tile and it crumpled right away. Hot steam and choking smoke blasted up like a trap, and Roa snapped into panic, demanding, "Are you okay?" The moment the smoke finally cleared, Roa spotted Sonia. Her outer clothes had fallen away. Sonia insisted she was fine, saying it was just smoke here. But the fog swallowed the entire room so thickly that everything beyond it was almost impossible to see. Roa froze, staring at the scene like his brain refused to load because his girlfriend sat there in just her underwear, her gear torn up and scattered around her, and he had no idea what any of it was supposed to mean. Stunned, the girl sits on the floor trying to piece together what just happened, while Roa snaps her attention, turning to Sonia and begging her to calm down and listen. He struggles to explain that he's still stuck in the smoke, and all he can make out is a blurry, fading outline. Roa finally realizes the whole world's just been smeared into blur and he has zero clue what's happening. But that girl has to do something, and fast. Sonia didn't understand what was happening at first then. Out of nowhere, something zipped past her and her whole focus snapped. She knew she had to get ready fast because something strange just hit, and she couldn't even process what she was seeing yet. She drops her gaze and boom finds every single piece of her clothes scattered on the floor. And in that instant, she realizes she's sitting there in nothing but her underwear. Her blood-curdling scream tore through the dungeon and somehow echoed all the way across the entire city. The girl screams at him, demanding to know why her gear has fallen apart. Rogan just shakes his head and says he doesn't have a clue. He never meant to make her feel awkward, but this was one of those traps where the smoke makes the equipment break apart. Sonia can't stop worrying that she should have worn something far more beautiful. Embarrassment floods Sonia as she blurts, "Don't look," and now she's about to gear up, just hoping a monster doesn't ruin everything right at that worst possible moment. Then, bam, a level 440 red turtle bursts out from behind the girl, and its massive eye clamps onto her in a dead stare the second it appears. Terror hits, and she's so panicked, she's ready to bolt. Roa shut that down in an instant, then cranked up a triple multiplier and stacked on pure physical reinforcement. The man lunged forward and smashed his water blade into the monster with everything he had. The turtle crumpled to the ground, and in that instant, it couldn't move or act anymore. She clutched her gear to her chest and stared at the guy with tears spilling down her face. Then Roa turned away and told her, "Don't worry, I'll back you up no matter what." Roa told the girl to get dressed while there was still a shot, and meanwhile the guys pulled out 23 magic stones, 6,000 each, and snagged thermal boa constrictor skin, 5 pieces for the same price, so if you sell it all, you cash out big. Sonia snaps, asking if today's request is finally done, and when Roa nods and says yes, a sharp, uncomfortable silence slams down between them. That trap moment keeps flashing back, and suddenly it's pure, unbearable awkwardness for both of them, like the whole room can't stop replaying it in their heads. The girl snaps that Almunda's dungeon is pure nightmare fuel, and the guy shoots back that it's not that bad, then he suddenly flips and apologizes to her out of nowhere, telling Sonia he kept delaying it because he was trying to handle the whole mess, only to realize he had no idea those kinds of items even existed. Turns out Roa's talking about the dungeon's trap detection ring, and the guy finally clicks, "I should have used this way earlier." Because spotting danger before it hits is the difference between surviving and getting wrecked. Roa's finally stacked with enough levels, and he's about to craft rings for himself and Sonia, but Sonia panics, worried this will drop his level down to 77. She respects him, yet she can't stand the idea of him wasting his hard-earned levels on anyone but himself, and Roa just shrugs and tells her, "Don't worry, I can boost it back up anytime. Way better than wiping out all your gear." He shoves the ring into the girl's hands and tells her they've got to test it tomorrow. The girl stares at the ring. Eyes glowing with pure admiration, she finds it unbelievably beautiful. Squeezes it in her palm with a sweet smile and genuinely thanks Mr. Roa. Chances are, Sonia will cherish it and wear it with care. Dead in the middle of the night, the girl slipped away to take a bath and sank into the steaming hot water like it was waiting for her. Pure bliss washed over her. Sonia knew an open-air bath in the hotel wasn't cheap at all. She told Rose she'd take a bath tomorrow morning, but she couldn't sleep at all, so she raced here anyway, convinced nobody would show up. She clocks it today has been wild, but Roa doesn't even flinch because this kind of chaos isn't new to him. He's an old hand at adventuring. Suddenly, the girl spotted a shadow off to the side, and it looked like another person was lurking nearby, with a body that was straight up beautiful. Turns out, Roa was right there beside the girl while a towel covered the guy's head, and perched on top was a little duckling toy. Sonia erupted into screams over what Mr. Roa was doing in the bathroom, and he scrambled to soothe her. There was no telling a former noblewoman to chill, while Sonia had no clue that most public baths are mixed. So, of course, she had no idea what she was walking into. Right then, to survive that brutal long road, a girl finally stumbled up to Enrico, and she didn't even know if a passing adventurer could really end a bandit with one clean strike. Enrico smiles and says, "I'm alive today because they did." He tells her the truth. It was a boy wizard and a girl who carried a massive shield, and they were way stronger than they looked. Turns out the girl had come to grab those bandits, but the moment she heard about two adventurers, she couldn't resist. She wanted to see them with her own eyes. If Sonia and Roa managed to impress her, then she might start considering recruiting them into her horde. The crew rolls into the Almond City Guild, and right on cue, Roa keeps forcing this awkward grin like nothing happened in the dungeon. Then he tells the girl to head back to work and drag herself to the dungeon again. even though last day just happened. Roa noticed Sonia locked onto something, and the girl was convinced yesterday's dungeon mess was her fault. Yet now her worries had shifted to a whole new problem. Sonia asked Roa demanded to know what they brought to eat, and the guy admitted it boiled volcanic caterpillars, and it turned out the menu in Almunda was way more modest than in the other cities. Roa ordered that rare dish on a whim, and the guy immediately asked the girl if she likes insects. Sonia didn't take that news at all, and when it came out, he dug in and ate it with both cheeks like he was absolutely in love with the taste. Roa shut his eyes and savored the tiny caterpillars like juicy, crispy bites, then went wild for the big ones, creamy, rich, and bursting with deep flavor, so hungry he couldn't stop, polishing off bowl after bowl with pure, unstoppable appetite. Turns out the caterpillars hit like top-tier gourmet. Roa swears the insect's sweet bite and the sauce's sharp tang blend so perfectly, it doesn't even feel like food anymore. It feels like a solid dessert you could chew. He drove the point home by insisting caterpillars are packed with nutrition and pure health, and that they'll only ever do the body good. So, yeah, that's exactly what fuels people to dig into this dish. Sonia starts to buy into what he's saying. Now she's convinced this dish is insanely tasty, and she decides she just has to take one more bite. Time's flown now. The guys have already marched into the dungeon, and Roa slips to the girl to apologize, asking how she's feeling. Sonia's still feeling awful after they locked in with that filling, healthy meal of caterpillars. The girl can barely keep her legs under her like she never signed up for this, and maybe it's way too soon she can still taste the moment she shoved that caterpillar into her mouth. Then Sonia clamped a hand over her mouth and the nausea hit her again. Those memories surged back like a wave. Roa's worry skyrocketed as he used the item's power and snagged a wooden bucket. Then the guy sprinted straight up to the girl. Roa thrust a bucket at Sonia and told her to dump everything in if she wanted. Then the girl freaked out, screamed that she didn't want that guy staring at her. That's when Roa finally got it being in a band isn't some easy game. Then the guy even snags the title of gourmet, and honestly, it doesn't shock anyone. The crew heads straight back into Almond's dungeon, and this time they don't stop there, they dive into the 4th level. He wields the water blade like a master, and with every swing, he drives the team to victory after victory. He thanks Sonia, still wondering if she was finally feeling better. Now she smiled back, nodded, and told him it was all because of him. Sonia bursts into relief now that the guy finally snaps back to his old level, and Roa notices he's hit his 310th level, meaning he's ready to unlock fresh magic again. Sonia finally realizes there's still a way to run into the lair and even snag the extra bosses. And the smart move is to stock up on broad water-based magic because this guy just knows it's time to grab that power now. Roa snagged a bubbling water orb for 300 levels. And yeah, it costs a hefty chunk, but the spell fires fast, so it's totally worth it. He grinned like crazy because this new purchase would level up his skills in a big way. Ro, that Thunderbolt lightning cast takes under 7 seconds. MP will refill when your level climbs, sure, but right now you'll have to make do with what you've got. Because Roba's itching to test a brand new skill and he wants to start it somewhere, right now. Then right out of nowhere, a voice from the side blares, shouting, "Help!" It turns out a terrified girl is sprinting toward the guy, screaming for rescue. Behind her, a massive monster barrels forward, trying to smash into her, but it's not even the only one. An entire pack of monsters is charging after her like a nightmare on legs. Turns out that girl was Masha, and every monster around them started marching straight for their heads. Roa has no idea why Masha's here, but somehow it's a lifesaver, and she throws physical reinforcement back into action. Next thing you know, the guy sneaks up behind Sonia, clamps his hands on her shoulders, and, while she's still processing it, he blurts an apology, then scoops her up and carries her in his arms. Sonia blushed but didn't fight back, then Roa scooped her up and soared over the monstrous beast, landing a whole world higher than it, where he gently set the dormouse down and stood beside it. Roa dragged Sonia with her to check out Masha because the girl moved in a weird, unreal way, and Sonia figured her friend had to have a real trick for it. Roa was determined to fire off her magic, knowing that if Masha bolted, the spell probably wouldn't land. But if it still tried, it would be insanely risky. I finally got to try the bubble water ball then. Boom! Water balls erupted everywhere around the monsters, like the battlefield was exploding with them. Masha barely got a glimpse of a pack of monsters, then they vanished, leaving nothing behind but chaotic splashes in the water. Masha's jaw dropped as monster after monster crumpled to the ground in the blink of an eye. The girl can't stop wondering who saved her because, as far as she knows, nobody should be able to pull off magic like that. Then she drops to the ground and Roa rushes up, firing off worried questions, desperate to know if she's okay. Masha knew that voice instantly, and her face lit up as she stared at the guy, eyes blazing with hope that salvation was finally in reach. The moment the level started climbing fast, the girl realized she'd been wrong. She didn't even recognize her own friend anymore, so the guy snapped, "Wait here until it stops rising." The guys came back to the guild and Masha's eyes spilled tears as pure joy hit her. She couldn't believe it, because she never thought she'd be rescued twice, not after this time. Made it look like she was completely doomed. Masha sprinted over, threw her arms around him, and thanked him from the heart. Sonia shot the girl down, saying a guy shouldn't get hugged twice. Sonia flashes a sweet smile and hands the girl her handkerchief, begging her to wipe those tears because Masha is ruining her pretty face with. Masha wiped at the tears on her cheeks, thanked the girl again, and called her pure kindness. Then Sonia chimed in, "Just say my first name." And she looked genuinely happy to be addressed that way. Roa can't stop wondering how Masha ended up in that dungeon, because this girl isn't an adventurer at all. She's just an ordinary merchant. Masha admits her little business went belly up, so she jumped into a career job just to pull in cash and keep moving forward. Masha leans in and tells them she's got the exact kind of materials adventurers are dying to find. Plus, she even has a touch of magic, so it's a smart move. Turns out Masha has this wild tax called throwaway luck, and today she cashed it in for her advantage. Only problem, she's been split off from the group and now she's stuck here all alone. Roa couldn't wrap her head around how that girl could slip away from the group so quickly. Masha warned that it could get her killed. Then, out of nowhere, a voice barked from the side, yelling at the courier. Turns out the adventurers trailed after her, furious and restless over the girl's vanishing. And now, because she disappeared so suddenly, they couldn't grab a single material. Masha blurted out that she was truly sorry and begged them to forgive her. But the team guys kept snapping at her, saying she should count herself lucky because that kind of material isn't rare. And they still wouldn't have the money to cover the girl's fee anyway. Masha reminded everyone they were totally lost, so yeah, it made sense. And the guy quickly told her not to worry because the teamwork would go on. One of the team members leaned in and made it crystal clear. The reward only kicks in based on how hard the girl grinds. Roa watched the whole scene unfold and felt it in his gut that something was off. If Masha truly ran, then there's no way she's at fault. She's fast enough to stay with them. Roa just knew the adventurers couldn't brush this off. Then Roa spun around and headed straight for the exit, telling Sonia to take care of Makaija today. Then he shrugged off his leaving with a quick, "I've got things to do, I'll be back," and ordered the girls to grab a honeycomb from the caterpillar, leaving Sonia dreading that awful taste. On a pitch-black night, the adventurers burst into wild laughter because the girl didn't sense a thing, just kept apologizing, and then they left the whole mess there themselves. Now he's vowing he won't jack up the price again. He'll just lean on her and get a bargain, because she'll feel guilty either way. Roa has finally found the adventurers, and he's furious because he's been sure they were up to something. Tricking people just to line their pockets is plain wrong, and he won't let it slide. The adventurers sneered at him, but in no time they realized he was someone tied to their career, and that changed nothing about how they felt. Roa shot out a heartfelt apology, then proudly said he'd magically recorded the whole conversation. Roa's told them that if the adventurers didn't want every secret spilled, they'd have to pay the courier. So the adventurers laughed in his face and mocked his heroism. And now I'm wondering if he realizes what happens to people who get way too carried away. Suddenly, one of the adventurers slipped in behind him and snapped a hand around his arm. Now it's 3 against 1. The perfect ambush planned? And the downloaded intel says Roa has 0 chance. The adventurers made their move to snatch the record before it could ever slip out. No way they'd let it get released. Right then, Roa wrenched herself free with raw physical force and shattered one team's grip instantly. He surged upward and slammed his fist into the enemy's face with everything he had. After that, Roa bolted into the night, slipping free of the adventurers. Then they snapped into a full-on chase right after him. The second an adventurer rounded the corner, a stone whammed into his face. Andy had clearly never seen that sneak attack coming, and the pain hit so hard it looked like he'd drop unconscious any second. Ron stared in shock at what just happened, while Roa was already thinking, 3 against 1 isn't how this should work. He insisted they split the fight and force it into clean one-on-one battles. That adventurer wasn't having it at all. He figured the guy had hit a dead end, and he instantly decided there was no way magic would work in a narrow alley. An adventurer sized up Roa and thought, "This kid's got real skill." And the best part was that Roa didn't even clock it, so he offered to try anyway. He realized swinging a sword in that tight alley was brutal, so he'd already given up on finding their adventure. Roa snapped his hand forward and blasted out a crushing strike of justice. Then the strongest fire attack hit so hard that the adventurer got launched flying clear out of the galaxy. The adventurer finally realized, no way, this can't be it. Roa just prayed the adventurers got the message and promised she'd make sure they apologized to Masha later, because that was the last thing she wanted to repeat. The adventurer nodded, swearing to spare everyone from those blows again, and Roa walked off. Suddenly, an image snaps right in front of him. There's a girl facing a guy glowing like she's made of light, and he can tell she's stunned by everything she sees. Completely blown away by the words and the way Roa moves, she probably thought his move was brave and worth respect, yet the guy still had no clue who she was because she stuck her hand right next to his face and leaned against the wall. That girl hails from Northeim, the royal city of Durham, and she's the Knight of Merrill. The girl firmly tells him to hop into her order, and she swears on it he won't regret it for a second. Right before this, some mysterious girl tried to pull him into her plans, and Roa was like, "Wait, what?" After a brutal run-in with vile adventurers, the last thing he expected was a relentless invitation to the nightly order. The guy launched into a loud rant about how he'd never buy an expensive painting like it didn't matter at all, and Nightmare just stared, completely lost about what he was even talking about. Roa takes this seriously. He refuses to let anyone cheat on his shift, and the girl fully believes that the guy is just trying to scare her. She told the girl not to fret and swore she wasn't a recruiter at all. Then she still begged you to join her order to fight beside her Roa, though. Remembered what his late grandmother used to say: anyone blocking the road at the intersection was acting awfully fishy, like a recruiter with tricks up their sleeve. Meryl shoots out an apology. She never wanted things to spiral like this. Then her mind flashes back to when the guys first crossed paths with old Enrico in the forest, and how Meryl had warned them that those travelers matched the adventurer's description, right down to what the old man had told them. Meryl finally snapped into belief because Roa's sharp sense of justice would not let those bullies walk away, and the killer physical skills he just showed had her jaw dropping. Meryl stared at this guy with burning eyes and begged him to join her order again, but Roa cut her off and refused coldly. The guy snapped back that he wasn't chasing anything else right now, he just wanted to master magic. Then he flicked his hand and vanished into the night. Meryl stood there, stunned. What kind of wizard skips the wand and swings a sword instead? Roa says it's been ages since a wand became a useful extra tool for practicing magic. Meryl snapped that it was a total waste because if that guy had trained in the proper order, he could have been the first knight. Then Meryl clamped a hand on the guy's collar and yanked him toward her because that girl is ready to set up a sparring match for a price, and if Roa comes out on top, Meryl will do whatever he demands. He hurried back to the girls, and Masha snapped at Roa, asking where he'd been. Then she told me that adventurers had shown up just to beg her for forgiveness. Moshe told them the guys all had twisted faces, like something was off. And after they paid Moshe for her work, Sonia pops out from behind the guy and gratefully thanks him. Sonia realized Roa had absolutely wrecked the adventurers because that's just how Roa is. She can't turn a blind eye when something like this happens. Roa smirked, then realized there was no hiding from Sonia. She straight up said she knows everything about him, but still, she can't pin down who's standing behind Roa. Even admits he doesn't know, yet this girl won't budge, hanging around the road like she owns the place. Then she steps up and declares herself with full confidence, a shining armor knight Meryl. Meryl blurts out an apology and declares she's taking Roa with her. Then Sonia just freezes, totally lost, because, come on, who could grasp that in a heartbeat when some armored stranger says she's taking your partner for herself? Roa pleaded with the knight not to say it, then admitted he trusted Meryl because the man once saved Enrico's life, only for Meryl to reveal that he wants Roa to join the order. Sonia finally clicked with everything that was happening, and once the truth was laid out, she found it way easier to follow every new explanation. So the guy admitted Meryl wouldn't quit, and they finally settled it with a training fight, no more talk, ace. If she wins, he has to join the order. If she loses, he gets his wish. Meryl's stuck doing everything for him, so Sonia panics and marches up to the guy asking what, a knight could do for him. And the guy just stares, stunned, then says she can help cover the times they're short on money or even spill info only knights would know. Sonia finally gets the whole picture, and the guy's left scrambling, asking himself what happened to her while Sonia nods and confirms she's on board with the training fight. Sonia is set on winning against that girl, but Marilla's determination hits just as hard. She won't back down. Roa demands why Sonia looks so terrified since he's out there battling by himself. Masha snaps back that her fight is already underway. The guys crashed into the guild's training area. Turns out the guild in Almunda has a beast of a training ground on your doorstep, and Masha says it's only getting bigger. Because with so many craftsmen here, they keep pumping out more and more of these setups. And the dudes standing beside them don't move an inch. Those adventurers stay planted next to the girls and proudly throw their cheers at the guy. Meryl leans in and asks if he's ready to throw down the fight. Starts the instant that coin hits the ground, and as long as he keeps his hands off the blade, he can go wild with his magic too. Meryl swears that if he can tag a guy once with his wooden sword, he'll claim the victory, then proves it by saying he'll win the moment he lands 3 hits. He looked stunned and blurted, "Why 3?" And he absolutely didn't think of himself as disabled at all. Meryl then said she was still a good knight. So yeah, this young man should treat everyday people with kindness, because the moment that coin hit the floor and rang out, the girl was already charging into the fight. Roa didn't even get a blink in before she was standing right beside him. Turns out Meryl moved faster than his eyes could follow. He spots her ball's line. If he can parry it with his own, he might just be able to take the win. But no matter what he tried, he couldn't breathe life into it. Then the girl instantly slashed him down, and Roa realizes she's poised in a focused stance, giving off this faint, unsettling power. One devastating punch it landed, and the girl immediately realized these so-called adventurers weren't used to trading blows like this. Meryl leaned in and told that guy, "If you don't give it your all, you're done." The guy finally got it. She was right, and backing down might not be the smartest move. Meryl and Roa stand toe-to-toe in the training arena, and Sonia's jaw drops because Meryl downs the guy with a single punch. Then Masha realizes this fight is way tougher than he ever imagined. Like she's already remembering that Meryl is basically a knight in shining armor. Meryl stood tall in front of him, daring the next hit to land, while Masha said the girl was second-rank knighthood, and Sonya quickly clocked that Meryl was strong enough to fight back. Masha's convinced that everyone expected that girl to become a knight. The girl can't remember a single time Ro has ever raised his sword at someone, and that thought leaves her quietly, seriously worried. The guy clamps down with sheer physical force, and Meryl instantly clocks that he's in his true element. Now Meryl is left staring at the guy like, how are you even going to pull this off this time? They clash their wooden swords again. Meryl even admits Roa is every bit as good as she hoped, and the guy immediately picks up the techniques and starts using them fast. The girls gawked at how fast their skills were exploding. Then Meryl clocked it. That guy was too good to let walk away. Marla starts loving the fight, and the guide can't even wrap his head around how that knight's face shows pure, shameless joy. The girl threw out a heartfelt apology and begged him to let it go. So Roa snapped that he'd never choose a life like that for himself as a knight. But in the end, he folded and said he'd recover right now. Right on his hand, this weird new object showed up, and the girl blurted, "Where'd you get that? Is it magic?" Roa didn't even smile as he admitted, "Because in a bit, my MP will be gone." Meryl laughs and tells them it's definitely, absolutely not happening again. The guy blasts out the purple flashes skill, and bright lightning erupts around him in crackling streaks. The girl flashes a grin and whips out a magic twist. She's behind him instantly, before he can even start using his skill, and Roa only gets the chance to glance back as Meryl is already slamming him with a second strike. Sonya and Masha were freaking out about Roa. He even admitted it hurt like hell, and when the knight rolled in, it hurried to apologize right away. Meryl admits it's insanely hard to stay gentle when a guy's in full swing, and she just hopes Roa isn't the type to whine about it. After that speech, she tore forward toward Roa again and begged him to keep the tournament going. He figures it out: no matter how much magic you throw, she'll crush the distance in a blink, so there's zero time to cast anything. Meryl is ready to land the final hit, telling him not to fret because she'll end the fight fast. Roa realizes he's already out of luck at this range. He's going to get crushed, and even if he tries to slip past her, his body won't survive the attempt. Sonya and Masha stared at the fight in total awe, but Roa shook his head because he refuses to stop there. He craves more adventures, wants to master magic, and honestly, it's all he's got. Then boom, this guy suddenly makes magic happen. His eyes burned with an energy he couldn't even explain, and the second he leaned forward, he was already behind the girl. Meryl gasped when her sword whipped way off to the side, and Masha and Sonya stared in shock, refusing to believe what they were seeing. The moment the creating magic effect fires off out of nowhere, everything goes haywire. He shattered the knight apart, ripping the sword away from her. Then madness sparked in his eyes as he leveled the blade straight at her. The adventurers erupted with joy at the win, and they backed that guy in every way they could. Meryl demanded to know what he just pulled off, because dodging from that far out is something no ordinary person could ever pull off. Roa had no clue what was happening to himself. He stared at his hand, stunned, and asked what kind of insane power had just sparked out of nowhere. Maryland and Roa squared off, and the guy already knew exactly what was coming. Just an ordinary wooden sword, nothing more. Before all of that, he was glowing like a living flare, and the guy himself didn't cast a single shred of magic. Roa stared hard at his sword, then dropped his guard and barely paid it any mind. Now he realizes he's just one guy facing the knight in shining armor, and the girl's rage just exploded. Just a heartbeat later, she exploded into tears like she never even saw the loss coming. Meryl broke into tears, wiping them away with her sleeves as she apologized through sobs, knowing that guy couldn't calm down there because there were barely any knights left, and every time newcomers tried, they couldn't handle it and quit on the spot. So Roa figured the girl must have been dealing with something serious. Still, Meryl snaps to it. She must keep her promise and do whatever her boyfriend demands. Roa grins and says he doesn't need anything right now, then tells them to shove it to later and figure it out first. Meryl's mood flipped in an instant. She even offered to take paid leave so she could finally rest up. Sonya sprints in from the side, throws her arms around him, and erupts in pure joy over the win. Sonya's eyes sparkle as she reels from that wild movement. Because she's never seen anything like it still, she can't help thinking it's seriously awesome. She then hypes Rola up as the best, and he just gives her a modest nod and says thanks. Sonya was so thrilled she forgot all about personal space. Then the guy snapped her back to reality and told her she was way too close. Sonya heard that and immediately threw her hands up to her face, then yanked herself a few steps back from the guy, while Masha just stared like, wow, he's actually amazing. Masha realized the world had frozen mid-motion, and a blade humming with magic hung in the air. Masha was desperate to learn how that guy pulled it off, but Rohai shot back that he had no clue, like, zero idea, and if you put him on the spot right now, he'd admit it. Without hesitation, he'd find it insanely hard. He's convinced that once he masters this power, conquering the dungeon will be downright fun for him. And Meryl just stared at the guy, lost in her own thoughts. Sonya clocked exactly what was going on. She saw that Roy was still soaking up that position like it belonged to him, and Roa didn't even try to hide it. He just pushed, asking if Sonya really didn't see it the way he did. while Meryl, at that very moment, stared hard at the wooden sword. Meryl flashes a smile, whips around to the guy, and tells him she finally understands why he won't step into knighthood. This dude's got a solid crew of friends, and you can tell he's genuinely having the time of his life. Meryl drops her head and sincerely apologizes for what she put him through. Pure shame hits her face, and she finally lets him go. She calls the Knights of Durham Barracks in Northame, the royal capital Whale, home. And when she's not there, she's either keeping watch at King's Landing or battling Spandens. Meryl grips the guy's hand and tells him to ask anytime she's needed. And Roa calls it a wild new experience before thanking Meryl. The crew heads back into the first level dungeon once more, and Roa's straight up relieved he didn't have to swap jobs today. They march in like normal and run it the same way. But the guy can't figure out why Masha is tagging along with them too. The girl beams and says, "I'm only talking like this because today Mrs. Sonia hired me for a career." Then the guy blurts, "Wait, why do you talk that way?" Sonia tells us the girl just wants to change how she talks, and Masha says the trio with the facial deformity mocked her as provincial for her accent. Yeah, they later apologized, but it still stung like a fresh wound, and the guy insists she shouldn't let it get to her. Sonia leans in and tells Masha that girls obsess over even the tiniest details, then straight up asks, "Want me to tell you you're pretty cute?" Masha snaps back and says she's not trying to be entertained while she's doing business. She wants it taken seriously. Masha turns to the guys and says, "Hunt with everything you've got right from the bottom of your hearts, because she's about to bring something that absolutely won't fit in the item drawer." Masha's about to grab that reward and kick off the fun right away. Then she's heading straight back to trading because Roa can tell she's got a sharp, business-minded drive. He'll only be happy if she decides to do it that way. The guy starts hacking up the loot, and Masha snaps, "Hold up, let me explain. These pieces aren't anything special, and we can't even take them off." The guy didn't even act like he knew. He just blurted that he'd already sold thermal boar skins for 6,000 merus because those things love scorching heat. And that's why in Almunda they barely show up, so the rate stays low. Masha swears by their tusks. Maybe it's because they're shockingly huge, so most adventurers never bother hauling them. But if they hit Mr. Rowe's item drawer, they're set. Because he instantly gets what she means, nods along, and lets them drop off light materials to Masha on top of that. This coffee is legit healthy, so they'll score a real bonus for it too. Turns out, there's a whole lot to learn from merchants, and breaking someone's claws and fangs is way easier than getting good skin. The girl shot the guy a look about how clean his knife was, and he immediately apologized. Just when another wave of heat was creeping around the corner, he spotted the picture of his kinsman being torn apart for supplies and his world snapped. He spun and bolted because tomorrow it looked like his turn was coming. 3 days later, the crew came barreling back to the guild and they cashed in the exact material Masha demanded, scoring a fat price. Mashi practically burst with joy because she finally got to be useful. And on top of that, she snagged a huge reward, turning everything into a total win-win. With this money, Moshe can finally grab a wagon to fuel her business. Then he realizes the courier service is about to shut down. Masha nods and confirms it. Then her eyes light up as she starts plotting her next move, heading to the royal capital of Nahurhain. The girl's dead set on striking it rich there, then paying back that kindness to the guy in full, and Sonia is crossing her fingers that by then the girl has finally found her voice. Masha ditches the guys and tells them, "If you ever come to the capital, come visit me." And the guy just waves her off, wishing her the best as she goes. Sonia clocked it. Masha was up and moving like she always does, while Roa just smiled, knowing they'd run into each other again soon. The guy finally gets it. Bringing in a courier is the smart move, and with Sonia's help, Masha is back on the road while Roa's soaked up a ton of knowledge about the materials. Sohan leans in and whispers that if Moshe were here, they wouldn't get this much alone time. And Roa grins, saying they're way better like this. Everything's easier to coordinate with their gear, and then the guys head off to spend the night. They crashed in the same room on 2 different beds, but Sonia tried to act tough while Roa, at least in her eyes, was painfully dumb. She even tried to copy Meryl's stubborn drive, and by the next morning, Roa got yanked awake by a violent flare of rage. Now they've crashed into the 5th level of the Almanda dungeon, and Sonia bolts from the flaming C-rank buffalo, sticking to the exact tactics the guy taught her. No mistakes. The moment Sonia springs up and blocks with her shield, Rua hurls a bubbling ball of water. Then every monster detonates into water explosions right on cue, and Sonia can't stop grinning because Rua hit the perfect timing, and the guy openly admits it's all thanks to her. Sonia finally hit her level goal 560, and now she's determined to keep stacking magic with it. She's even diving into studying Raincloud, a spell worth 500 levels, and Roa is so locked in on learning that nothing else matters. Even though the MP drain and rollback time hit hard, because the damage payoff is insanely worth it. Roa thinks he's got the levels to grab the skill right now, but Sonia stops him and tells him to hold up once he's out of the dungeon. Then he'll be able to do it. Because if he burns 500 levels here, he'll just reset back to level 1. And trying to boost it again inside this place is downright dangerous. Roa shot into anger at once. If there's money he can use, he wants it gone right now, while Sonia snapped back, saying she had to plan for the future. The guys huddled with the others, grinning hard today. They pulled in 15 magic stones and snagged a whopping 90,000 Muru's rank. With housing prices crushing them, he'd be thrilled if they could scrape together a bit more. Sonya pushed the plan the next day go for level 6, and pray they uncover materials they can sell for way more than they're pulling in right now. The guys got yanked off their focus when a strange voice popped up from the sidelines, and that dark-haired newcomer blurted out something about the 6th level. The stranger fired off a warning and told the guys straight up it wasn't safe, especially if they wanted to reach the 6th level, because only an A rank could get them there. He even insisted their rank should match his, and the way he carried himself screamed, "Experienced adventurer." The young man insists it's his, so Roa tells the guy to brag somewhere else, but the stranger wasn't trying to mess with anyone at all, and he never wanted to hurt them. Turns out he didn't come for drama at all, he just wanted to invite him to dinner and hand over whatever info he had. And that's how Sonya and Roa agreed. They showed up for dinner, and boom, a lavish meal was waiting like a challenge, with Roa staring in shock at a sizzling, juicy beefsteak that seemed to call his name with every waft of aroma, while Sonya refused to believe it was really all paid for by the establishment, because the cook had clearly gone all out to make it perfect. He told them, "This is my apology for snapping at you guys earlier," then leaned in and urged, "Don't be shy, dig in and start eating." Roa snatched a chunk of meat, but the name of that dish slipped his mind. Then the stranger leaned in and told me it was medium rare. Roa tore into the meat, and suddenly tears streamed down his face. Shock hit the guy when Roa started crying after just one bite, so he blurted out what Roa usually eats, and Sonya answered, dead serious, "A caterpillar." Turns out that stranger's name is Surai, and yeah, he's an A-rank magician then. Sonya steps up, introduces herself, and makes roads known too. Sirai locked eyes with the girl and fired off a question. He leaned in and asked if they'd cross paths anywhere before Sonya felt it in her bones that they hadn't. Suraj is tossing out what he might be thinking, and the conversation keeps rolling by the way those guys are dressed. It's obvious they've only just arrived in Almond. Surai told them the dungeon's monsters crank up to the 6th level, and to beat them, you need to be around level 900. Almost all of them are monsters of rank. Sonya then realizes the extra boss they fought earlier had a recommended level near 1,000. Roa nods and says, "If these monsters don't come in packs, we've got a real shot at winning." Surai demanded to know their ranks after they wiped out the extra boss. Roas swore he was still stuck at C rank, and Surai didn't get it at all because Roas looked like he was clenching a whole storm of words he couldn't say. Guys, in Almundo it's even worse to go. There aren't enough high-level adventurers left to hold the line, so the place is packed with monsters nobody has ever beaten. Roa's eyes lit up like fireworks, and Sarai instantly saw it. He couldn't wait to dive in and check it out. Then Roa leaned over and asked Sarai, "So you're a magician too, right?" Sarai shot Roa a question. Where was his staff? The guy shrugged and said he'd always fought as a swordsman, only picking up magic a month ago, so he thought he could live without the staff. Surai got it. Beating a C-ranked dungeon in a month was insane, but using a staff could cut Roa's cast time even more yet. Roa clearly had no idea any of this was even possible. Sukri kicks things off by saying the cast has to come first because it's the key to launching those magical circuits. Once the staff starts firing, it sends the magic through and even cuts down the spell's duration. And Sonya quickly realizes Sukri isn't just using that staff for show. The guy shot down Sonya's guesses and swore he always goes around casting destruction. This is the first time Roa has ever heard that definition. Sari grips his staff in his hand and says, "You've got to tweak the magic chains themselves. Plus, not everyone can pull it off, then you can see it." Sari's proud of his skills, and Roa realizes he knows exactly how masterfully he handles them. Siraj claims he can pull it off because he's a genius, and Rua clocks that he's crazy self-confident, so confident he actually thinks he deserves that title. That hit Roma hard, so he started thinking fast. He remembered the time he battled Meryl. In the end, he didn't do a thing yet. Something magical fired off like true sorcery. Maybe this power comes from making magic itself, Hing. Either way, Roa's got it in his head now and he's going to test it, then try to pull off that same trick again. Roa stared into the mug's reflection, and something in his gut clicked. He knew there had been a subtle shift back then because he hadn't triggered that state himself, and that alone made it wildly different from the usual one. Sarai clocked it right away and demanded, "What happened?" The guy laughed it off, then admitted they were still happy to meet Surai because they both happened to be magicians. He nods and agrees, buzzing with the idea that he and Roa could forge into true rivals. Then Roa blows right past him like she didn't even hear a word. Yesterday, Roa felt pure relief the second they stepped into a peaceful square with zero danger in sight, and now they were fully locked in, determined to grab magic for 500 levels right here. Sonya nods and agrees this place is safe. Even if the lawyer's only on the first level, Roa grins like crazy and slams magic into his panel, practically vibrating with joy because he's finally studied the rain cloud. This skill hits for a base of 30,000 damage, and if he lands a weak point, he can double it in a single shot. So maybe, just maybe, he can take down a B-rank monster too. But out of nowhere in the Roa Park, right at the first level, a tiny cat from the second level lunged and bit. Then the guy crumpled to the ground, screaming in pain. Sonia panicked and begged Roa not to run off, not after that brutal bite. Night rolled in, and the boys stumbled back to their room, only for Roa to realize the bite from a tiny cat almost yanked him out of this world, and he'd already believed it was over. Sonia stepped in, snapped out the plan. They had to crank the level back up first, then move to the 6th floor the day after tomorrow. Roa remembers Sarai's warning level 6 is a death trap, and he grits his teeth, determined to claw back at least 500 levels before they even step near it. Then he flips through the panels and suddenly catches something. Roa shot up from the table and erupted into a scream over what had just happened. Sonia didn't stay detached either. She pushed closer. Then they both stare at the panel, hunting the truth. Turns out the last one costs 3,000 in total. Rofa gets a level reset bonus next, and now he can unlock double experience for every single member of the group. The guys were blown away. These skills hit like a cheat code, doubling their power and making everything faster. They sprinted back to Almond's first level dungeon, and right away the guys sliced the boars again with the water blade. They've already wiped out 2 monsters, and honestly, that alone should have been enough to blast their level up by around 150. Roa's grinning because now he can pull it off way faster than before. Now he can pull it off in one shot. He's hit 250 levels, period. Sonia's blown away while the guy swears they'll zip to the 6th floor in no time because with their brand new skills, there's zero room for doubt. Sonia can't stop smiling at this pace. Roa is about to rise as the most powerful man on Earth, and she's thrilled because she only wants the best for him. Roa nods along, and suddenly it hits this isn't just a dream anymore. Mastering magic and becoming the world's strongest isn't some far-off fantasy now, it's her single brutal goal. Roa realizes he totally got carried away. Sonia shakes her head and insists it's a huge honor for her to help him become the most powerful person in the world, because she genuinely believes he's got greatness in him. Roa froze in surprise, then thanked the girl and admitted she'd always been a huge help to him, while Sonia practically beamed because Roa finally noticed her attitude. The guys stumbled on yet another monster, a giant D-rank squid, and when they locked eyes with it, those massive orbs sparked raw horror in seconds, while its red vessels forced anyone who stared to burst into tears. The guys handled him without breaking a sweat. Roa's loving how fast they're leveling up because now this dude just hit level 610. At this pace, that dude is about to wipe out every dungeon boss with zero trouble. Sonia just knows you still need to fear a whole pack of monsters, and if they're being ranked up to B, this run could drag on forever, but he gets it. They ended up in the 6th floor dungeon, but there was always a way back to the 5th, so they headed straight for the stairs first. Surely they wouldn't step inside and get monsters shoved in their faces right away. Then Roa peered through the archway, and a silhouette started crawling out of the dark. It turns out the threat was a C-rank red orc, so Roa snapped out the order to attack, and Sonia immediately moved into position, while the guys moved like pros, quick and steady, with zero time to panic. She hurled her shield straight at the monster, and Sonia's 100 sure she won't let Roa stand in her way. The orc shoved the shield with brutal, bone-cracking force, yet it didn't faze Sonia, not even for a second. He knew she had 640 levels, and she could spot the gap in her opponent's power like it was written on the air. So this was it. Time to strike, right now, using your skill. The guy whips out a water blade, then turns to the girl and thanks her for sticking around for all this time. Sony's help totally priceless here because him and Roa together make an unstoppable team. The guy charges straight at the monster and snaps that it should learn from Sonia, because if it refuses to defend itself, it's as good as dead. Then Roa whips his sword around with everything he's got and lands a single crushing blow. And just like that, the guys cranked the power up. Sonia's eyes went wide when her level shot straight to 90 and the whole team's stats jumped hard. So now they can handle errands with way more efficiency and smash monsters even faster. Now the guys hit instant level up and it's straight up mind-blowing. No more endless waiting, just seamless upgrades that make all their research fly. The dungeon left the monster crumpled on the floor and Roa said, "Just let me take the magic stone and go." But he can't fight while that 150-second rollback is ticking, and the monsters hear the commotion then swarm in fast. Even so, he's convinced he can take out 1 or 2 more Sonia snaps. Watch this! And the girl whips her head sideways, then just freezes, stuck like that. Turns out a whole horde of monsters is charging straight at the guys, ugly, vicious, and clearly up to no good, with towering lizard things, brutal orcs, and every other nightmare creature in the pack. The boys bolted for the stairs, and I was lucky they were right there because Sonia was dead sure those monsters would stop right here and not climb with them to the upper levels. But it didn't rattle the monsters one bit. They surged up the stairs. Sonia blurts out, "So what are we supposed to do? Because if they freeze here, they'll get swallowed by a monster on the 5th level, no saving that. And even if they somehow escape, the guy doesn't know whether they can ever claw back the time they lost." Then Sonia suddenly clocks the giant clouds of smoke, and the memory hits her hard. She once walked straight into a trap just trying to remove the equipment. She clapped her hands over her face, convinced Roa would be naked any second. Then she heard Roa's voice call out, asking what she'd been staring at. Roa grinned because that detection ring lit up the danger. He spotted the trap at the last second and dodged it clean. The girl stared at the floor and Rua clocked it instantly, then snapped, "Why are you so down?" Suddenly, Surai popped up behind the guys and he couldn't help but grin. These rookies were still yapping like nothing could stop them, bursting with energy and pure excitement. He brandishes his staff and unleashes his burning skill magic, blazing as it blasts every monster out of his path, keeping the whole floor spotless. The flames keep roaring on the floor for a few more heartbeats before finally dying down, and the guys stare in awe because monsters are dropping like flies in the blink of an eye. He grips his staff tight in both hands and warns, "The 6th level is brutal." Roa grabs the guy's arm and thanks him for saving their lives, then shoots, "Did Surai use fire magic on you? He can't believe it." Some rank a powerhouse lands one single blow and takes everyone out, even with that horrible, unlucky attribute working against him. Surai boasts that he's a genius and can go for it no matter what rank the monster is, while Roa just watches, because that kind of unshakable confidence is basically his trademark. And in battle, it's lethal, since it lets you see the victory coming before the fight even starts. Rua admits Surai's confidence is backed by real power, because he hasn't even thrown a single spell yet. Then Rua can't help but focus on one terrifying truth. This is the kind of destruction that's already hitting Caste right now. Sonia realizes that at moments like these, instant magic can save you, and the guy tells her it takes raw talent, though he still can't overlook how far those C-rank guys pushed it. Sarai's convinced Ro guy's got talent too, and if he keeps grinding, that gift is going to pay off someday. The moment the guys stepped in, monster roars crashed up from the bottom of the stairs and the air filled with fury. Surai, get ready to show them another magic trick for fun. He climbs several levels off the ground and launches into the air, but Roa cheers it on as wind magic, while Suraj snaps, telling him this is straight-up gravitational magic. Surai peered around and realized there were only a handful of monsters left. He fires off Meteor Shower, and meteors plus a scorching shell rain down from the sky. Meteorites slammed into the monsters again and again, wiping out every last living place. No one could survive the fallout. Sonia can't stop marveling at what she just saw, and Roa realizes this magic's firepower blows past the flames Aishin has. Fire magic itself is already something special, the kind that makes you stand out the second it shows up. And in that moment, Roa finally understands what a rank power really means. His eyes flared with hope, and he's dead sure he'll master magic like that someday. Now his goal feels even more unstoppable than before. Surai drops in with confidence blazing in his eyes. He's sure he'll pull this off, and he can't wait to see Roa grow even stronger. Then he turns, hurries out, and tells the guys, "Catch up with you later." Roa and Sonia lock their eyes on the guy as Suraj strides down the alley. He already grabbed his reward from the guild, and when he flashes a bit of magic, those guys can't help it. Their eyes light up, and they're just about dying laughing. Thanks to those guys, even Surai's dull work feels way more fun. Then, out of nowhere, someone shouts from the crowd, "It's a gang of bandits, and they don't play nice." These guys show up like they're there to squeeze something out of the meeting, grinning as they demand that if he doesn't want to get hurt, he'll have to hand over every last coin he's holding. And man, they look every bit the real deal, smirking and mocking Surai like they're already counting his money. Sura totally ignores these guys and refuses to take them seriously. Rage burned in their chests, and they bolted straight into the attack. But the bandits couldn't even step, in fire magic tore them down first, leaving nothing standing. The lone survivor stumbled back in pure horror, and Surai realized he'd rather deal with people than monsters, because people think, fight back with dignity, and make everything way more interesting. And when Surai stared on after slipping into a sheep's skin, he looked totally different. Like he could snare a bunch of fresh, clueless bandits just like these. Yeah, he was enjoying it, and you could tell he had a plan cooking.